Thank you, Pak Habibie, ya, because ini yang dinanti-nanti oleh kita semua nih, webinar ini kali ini mengenai PI STEM.
Okay. We also need to make sure Pak Bambang is already here in our Zoom webinar. Bambang Guritno. Yes. Pak Franky, suara saya kedengaran?
Ya Pak, kedengaran Pak Bibi. Silakan.
Ya oke, kita sudah ada Pak Bambang di Zoom meeting kita. Nih, Pak Bambang udah hadir.
Sudah 40 ya? Wah.
Ya. Pembicara lain juga Pak Franky. Udah siap semua ya?
Ya, saya confirm Prof. Chu sudah, Angelin dan Toby Peng sudah, Sasa Popovic sudah, Pak Bambang juga sudah. Sudah semua, Pak.
Oke. Pak Imam, Pak Pras, shall we start the opening ceremony?
Okay, yes, of course, Pak Habibie. Mas, ya,
Yes,
Mas Imam, ya, please proceed,
Yeah.
Mas.
Siap.
Yeah, just to inform that we have already 100 registered participants in this event. So let's just start the opening and while waiting for them to join us.
Pak Bibi. Pak Bibi. Halo.
Ya, Pak.
Shall we start now, Pak?
Yeah, I think we can start. Pak Prastiwo, we can start, Pak Pras.
Ya, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat siang, ya, good afternoon, everybody who is joined in this webinar, which is titled as PE Practice in Indonesia and Overseas Benchmarking. Yeah. So this webinar is organized by Civil Engineering Chapter, collaboration with the PII Kepri and PII Batam. So in here there is chairman of Civil Engineering Chapter, ya, Bapak Insinyur Bambang Guritno. Ya, good afternoon, Pak.
Good afternoon.
Then, then there is speakers from Pak Franky, ya. Good afternoon, Pak Franky. Welcome. Then another speaker also from Singapore, yeah, Professor Choi Sing Ping, yeah. Good afternoon, sir. Then Chairman of TV Architect Angel Chan, and there is a Director of White and Wood Popovic, yeah. So in this openings, we will start with this national anthem of Indonesia and hymn of PII. Okay, please stand down and give and start of anthems. Mas Imam.
Siapkan airku
itu kalau saya satu teknik apapun itu insinyur, tapi kan ada diganti ada teknik, ada apa gitu, ada top gitu.
Mempersatukan cakrawala dunia, kami insinyur Indonesia, kami memajukan bangsa, mensejahterakan masyarakat untuk kemanusiaan semesta alam. Kami insinyur Indonesia, siap membangun bangsa.
Thank you. Okay, the next agenda is opening remarks by Chairman of Civil Engineering Chapter PII, Bapak Insinyur Bambang Guritno IPU. The time is yours, Pak. Please.
Terima kasih Pak Prastiwo ya. Distinguished speakers, moderators, engineers, and all honorary guests. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat siang and good afternoon. Thanks God, and it's been my pleasure to welcome you all in this webinar. I hope that you always be in a good health, good mind, and happiness. Friends, I believe that it's been recognized by all of us. Engineering is among professions that has been proven, if I may say, the utmost important, determining the level of advancement of civilization, the progress of development of a nation, and human welfare. No doubt it has happened in centuries. Only by the hand of engineers we can shape our world, improve our quality of life, and reach out our dreams. There are only few words that have been influencing the performance of engineers: science and technology, standards, ethics, and strong good character. In Indonesia, the institution of engineers was established in 1952, but the law regulating how the engineers can carry out their performance properly has not been existed until 2014, namely the Law of Engineering Profession, or Undang-Undang Keinsinyuran number 11, 2014. The main objective of this law is to regulate engineering practice in Indonesia so that it gives protection and legal certainty to the engineers, the users of or clients of engineering services, and the beneficiaries, including private, public sector, and the community. Although the law has been enacted since 2014, but the government regulation number 25, 2019, as the operational instrument of the law only existed in 2019. After years of existence, both the law and the government regulation, then we can now see as it is. I will share the slides, a few slides. Can you see it? Is it okay? Can you see it?
Yes.
Yes, we okay.
Yes, Pak. Yes.
I see.
The lack of enforcement in the implementation of law number 11, 2014 and government regulation number 25, 2019 regarding the engineering profession. Then the need to learn more on professional engineers' practice in various countries who have been implementing it. It is a fact that clients, users or project owners, and the engineers do not clearly understand the implementation of engineering law number 11, 2014 and its benefits. The philosophy of PE practice to some extent has not been caught by Indonesian stakeholders. engineers, clients, and the public. So the topics or the objective of this seminar will be this international will elaborate the philosophy and the legal framework of PE practice in Indonesia and neighboring countries such as Singapore, US, Canada, etc. Then disseminating the law number 11, 2021 and government regulation 25, number 25, 2019 regarding engineering profession, including PE practice guidelines in Indonesia. This webinar hopefully will provide application, compliance, and benefit of PE from the company perspective, in particular from Singapore perspective. Sharing the experience of practicing PE in Singapore, US, Canada, and others. So finally, I hope that the issues to be discussed in this webinar will be, number one, PE practice guidelines in other countries as a lesson learned to our organization. That is the PII. Yeah. Then next is, what are the advantages, the benefits of being a professional engineer to be compared with ordinary engineers or engineering graduates? And then thirdly, requirements to be a PE in other countries. Yeah. Competency exam, engineering education, etc. And then number four, the implementation of PE stamps, which is commonly used in as distinctive mark of PE who approves or endorse engineering documents. Number five, enforcement of PE law adopted in other countries as a reference for Indonesia to strengthen the existence of our law. Finally, let me extend my gratitude and appreciation to our colleagues at PII Regional Kepulauan Riau as well as Batam chapter for their always collaboration with Civil Engineering College, yeah, or PKSipil, PII, in hosting this webinar. Thanks also to our honorary speakers, moderators, and all participants for their knowledge sharing with us. We do hope that this webinar will be fruitful and beneficial to all of us. With God's permission, allow me now to open this webinar officially. I prepare already the hammer for you. Thank you very much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Waalaikumsalam.
Yeah, thank you, the chairman of Civil Engineering Chapter of PII, Bapak Insinyur Bambang Guritno, IPU. Okay, so we will move to the next agenda. The first session will be moderated by Bapak Insinyur Frankie Ken, IPM. The speakers, the Honorary Mr. Chu Sing Sing, PhD. Okay, Pak Frankie, please, the time is yours.
Thank you, Pak Bambang, Pak Habibie, and Pak Prastiwo. It's with the great honor that I introduced our first speaker is Professor Chu Sing Ping. Professor Chu Sing Ping, on a personal note, was my professor back in Nanyang Technological University in Singapore. He's currently a professor of Cluster of Engineering, Director of Cluster of Engineering in the Singapore Institute of Technology, the fourth autonomous university in Singapore. He was a member of the Professional Engineers Board in Singapore, and he will be delivering on the legal framework and philosophy of the PE statute in Singapore. Prof. Chu, please, the time is yours. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Frankie. Selamat petang, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity. Frankie, can you see my full slide now?
Yes, we can. And we can hear you.
The full slide, yeah, not the two slides together.
No.
Okay, very good. Okay, again, selamat petang. I have to deliver this in Bahasa English because my Bahasa Indonesia is not very good, you know. So I will try my best. And again, I like to thank the Persatuan Engineer Indonesia, PII, for this opportunity to share. What I'm going to talk about is more in my capacity of former capacity as the board member of the Professional Engineers Board of Singapore. Not so much as a professor of civil engineering, because this talk is related to professional engineering. And I was with the Professional Engineers Board in Singapore for 9 years. And so I will share with you what I know from that experience. So I only stepped down as a board member this year, effectively only 1st January of this year. So I'm going to talk about the practice of professional engineering in Singapore. And well, your chairman, Engineer Bambang, has talked about an act to regulate professional engineers. So there is in Singapore this Professional Engineers Act, and I will try to explain what this act is all about. So the act would involve basically the act that is established in Singapore that we call it the Professional Engineers Act. The act is to establish what I've highlighted in red, Professional Engineers Board. That is to provide for the registration of professional engineers. Then also to regulate the qualifications and conduct of professional engineers. And also companies to regulate corporations, partnerships, and limited liability partnerships. And basically everyone who are in the business of supplying professional engineering services in Singapore. So as a professional engineers, we provide and we supply professional engineering services. So what is professional engineering services? Professional engineering services means engineering services or advice that we give in connection with any feasibility study, planning, survey, design, construction, commission, operation, maintenance, management of engineering works or projects, and including any other engineering services approved by the board. So I think it's important here just to stop for a while and pause. In Singapore's context, Professional Engineers Board is actually set up under the Professional Engineers Act for this purpose. In many countries, this responsibility may lie with the Persatuan or with the Institution of Engineers. But in Singapore, this responsibility does not lie with the Institution of Engineers Singapore. It is with the Professional Engineers Board. So I want to make this very clear, right? There is a Persatuan Engineer Singapore, which is known as the Institution of Engineers Singapore, yeah, which I'm sure Persatuan Engineer Indonesia has very good relationship, you know. But the purpose of registering professional engineers, regulating the qualification, the conduct of the professional engineers who are in the business of supplying professional engineering services, lies with the Professional Engineers Board of Singapore. So just to recap, again, under the Professional Engineers Act, we have to have a board. Then the board provides registration of professional engineers, sets out the privileges of professional engineers, and obviously regulate the conduct, will punish professional engineers who are, so to speak, gone astray or break the laws, as well as to regulate the corporations, because companies also supply professional engineers services in Singapore, right? So I am going to move a bit faster. Under the Professional Engineers Act, there will be subsidiary legislations. There will be the rules, professional engineers rules. There will also be things like professional engineers in bracket the Code of Professional Conduct and Ethics, and also the Professional Engineers Board's rules and other approved notification, professional engineers approved qualification notification. The last one is, of course, quite important because it is related to the registration of professional engineers. So what sort of qualification is approved for the purpose of being registered as a professional engineer? So that's why you have this notification that sets out clearly what qualification is approved, what qualification is not approved, and when you're not approved, what you need to do to get yourself approved. So this approved qualification notification is quite an important document, really, right? Now, let me quickly just run through some of the things. The Professional Engineers Board is a board under the Ministry of National Development of Singapore. It has 15 board members. 6 of them are professional engineers with practicing certificate. Practicing certificate is PC, practicing certificate. So you need a practicing certificate to be able to supply and provide professional engineering services. Otherwise, it's not legal to do so. So you need to renew, it's like a license. We call it a practicing certificate. It's a license so that you are allowed to sell and provide professional engineering services. So 6 of these out of the 15 will be elected by the member, by all the professional engineers in Singapore. They will elect 6 out of the 15. Another 6 will be appointed by the Minister of National Development. The minister will appoint 6 more. And then we have 6 plus 6 is 12. We have 3 more, what we call ex officio. So these are permanent members. The Commissioner of Building Control from the Building and Construction Authority, or Building Authority, will be an ex officio member. The President of the Institution of Engineers Singapore, that means the equivalent, maybe I'm not sure whether it's equivalent, but you know, to the Persatuan, but the President of the Institution of Engineers Singapore or his representative will be also a member. And then from our sister Board of Architects, there is a Professional Engineers Board. There is also a Board of Architects in Singapore. We call it a BOA, Board of Architects. Professional architect, like my colleague, architect Angelina Chan, you know, for example, she will sit in the Professional Engineers Board, and altogether there are 15 of us, and then including supported by the registrar and the secretariat staff, right? So the key functions of the Professional Engineers Board, the main function is to keep the register of professional engineers, practitioners and licensees, approve and reject application for registration. So there are people who want to apply to register as a professional engineer, so you have to approve them, you have to process them, and conduct professional examination, professional interviews to qualify, then license the corporation, partnership, and limited liability partnership, establish and maintain standards of professional conduct and ethics. Where you have disputes, we hear and determine disputes relating to professional conducts or ethics of professional engineers. And then finally, the last function, promote learning, education, and development of professional engineering. So this is just to summarize what the Professional Engineers Board, the PE Board, does. The question is, why we need professional engineers and why do we need to register them? So we only register professional engineers with practicing certificate, PC. So only registered professional engineers with practicing certificates can provide professional engineering services, sign and submit prescribed document to the government authorities or agencies. So the government departments, the building departments, for example, the plans, the structural plans, for example, or other government departments, if it's not submitted by a professional engineer registered with the Professional Engineers Board, they will be rejected, you see, because only registered professional engineers with valid practicing certificates can provide professional engineering services, right? What are the various government departments in Singapore that would accept only submission from PEs, or what we call competent, or what sometimes they refer to them, practicing professional engineers with valid practicing certificates? We refer to them as competent or qualified person. Qualified person. Who are the qualified person who can then submit plans or drawings, documents to the government authorities? So government agencies or departments will be like the building and construction authorities. So all the buildings in Singapore will have to be regulated. So they will have to submit to BCA. There are also other submissions to the Public Utility Board, Land Transport Authority, your civil plans, your roadworks, Energy Market Authority, National Environment Authority, Minister of Manpower, Fire, Safety and Shelter Department. So this is just an example of the various government agency or departments that the QP will have to deal with. And professional engineering services, we are all engineers here. I'm pretty sure you know what is what service or what work we do. So this is just an example of very much our built environments that we see around us. Yeah, these are work of engineers contribute to this. Of course, other professions, architects and other professions are equally important, but of course, engineers also play a significant role to ensure that we are able to have this infrastructure for us. Yeah. So let me move on a little bit more to in terms of registration. I want to become a professional engineer. What do I do? Now, we service in a way the various government departments, and depending on what the government department needs, for example, at this point in time, the Professional Engineers Board do not register every engineers in every discipline. No, we only register engineers in the following prescribed branch of engineering: in civil engineering, in electrical engineering, mechanical engineering, and chemical engineering. So if you are a marine engineering, you are aeronautical engineer, we do not register this branch of engineering. They can go to the Institution of Engineers Singapore. You must remember our purpose of the Professional Engineers Board is to provide and support the government department. So if there is no need for them, then obviously we will not register this branch of engineering. So for now, it is only in 4 branches of engineering, and you can see these are very much related to the built environment, Now, how to register engineers? What are the registration criteria? Very quickly, you must have an approved qualification, a degree that's recognized. You must sit and pass some professional exams. You must have some relevant practical experience, and then you finally pass an interview. I think our registration criteria are not very different from many people. It's quite similar. You have a approved engineering qualification. You must sit for some exams, have some experience, professional work experience, and then finally an interview, right? So in terms of approved qualification, as I said, there is this notification 2009. This is quite a thick document that covers what are the approved documents or approved qualification that is acceptable for the purpose of registration as a professional engineers with the PE board. Yeah, and in terms of first requirement, I'm just trying to generalize what are the requirements for approved qualification, aka your degree. So first, you must have a degree in the prescribed branch of engineering. If you have a degree in aerospace engineering, so that is not in our prescribed branch, you see, right? So it has to be our prescribed branch of engineering related to civil, mechanical, electrical, and chemical engineering. It should be 4 years duration. The degree program should have a 4-year, at least 4-year degree program. If you don't have, maybe we can have some further learning, yeah? So if you're slightly short, but still is in the prescribed branch, it's possible to supplement with a master's degree or a doctorate, degree. Advanced standing is maybe, because you don't do all your 4 years in that university, home campus, you do in some training programs and so forth. There are some rules on advanced standing and on-campus studies, you see, because there are many colleges providing degrees, but they are actually doing training, and so there are rules with regards to advanced standing and off-campus study requirements. So generally, in a very broad stroke, these are some of the things under approved qualification. More specifically, in terms of approved qualifications, there I can sort of divide into 3 categories. One, a recognized degree, that means there's a list of universities that's recognized. So that will be the easiest. Then the other category will be those degrees that's accredited under the Washington Accord, which is Singapore is a signatory countries of Washington Accord, together with many other countries listed down here. And the third category is maybe other degrees is not accredited and not recognized. Then maybe we will have to look at them, although it may be 4 years, you have to supplement with a master's degree and so forth. You can see that under category 2, most under the Washington Accord, there are many degrees from almost, fair to say, the English-speaking world, and also not really true. There are other countries, like for example, countries from Pakistan and Peru and so forth, who are also full members of the Washington Accord. So their accredited degrees will also be acceptable, right? Then moving very quickly to professional exams. So you now got a degree that's recognized for the purpose of becoming a PE. You have some working experience, then you need on to take some professional exams. We call it professional engineers registration exams. We call it registration exams. There are 2 of them here. So one, we call it the fundamental of engineering exam, and the other one is a practice of professional engineering exam. Yeah, and you have to take the practice of professional engineering exams after you have a few years of working experience. And we provide information booklets. These are readily downloaded from our PE board website. On the left is the professional engineering exams. On the right is the practice of professional engineering exams. So inside this booklet, information booklet, there will be a lot of information on what these exams is all about. So these are information booklet for applicants. Just to give you a little bit more insight to what these exams are all about, we start off with the fundamental of engineering exams. There are 2 parts. So it's a 1 full day exam. Part 1 is 3 hours. The 10 minutes is for you to read. And it basically has 40 multiple choice questions, MCQ. The second part, which is in the afternoon, is also another 3 hours. Basically, the 10 minutes is for you to read. We give you additional time to read. You basically have to attempt 5 questions out of 9 questions for the civil engineering FEE, 5 out of 7. So you have some choice for the electrical, mechanical, and chemical. So that is for the first professional exam, first registration exam. The second one, the practice of professional engineering exam. Again, you have 2 parts, part 1 and part 2. And this is also 6 hours. The first part of the practice of professional engineering exams has to do with the professional code of conduct and ethics, professional ethics. So it's a shorter exam paper, 2 hours. The second part is more the design related. to do with the so it is a 4-hour paper for the second part of the practice of professional exams. Yeah? And an example of students, we have many students, many candidates. I won't say students. Yeah, many candidates taking these professional exams, and this was before COVID. This was before COVID, where it was possible. Now, as it stands, it is very challenging to conduct registration exams. We have postponed for, I think, this year and last year, the professional exam. So the Professional Engineer Board is under pressure to sort of, try to quickly resume this registration exam, because many people wants to become a professional engineer. So then after all if you pass the exams, then you go for the professional interview and you prepare a report and so forth. And these are some of the details, yeah. And so that is a more routine route, but there are also experienced candidates. So there are people which are matured, 25 years of practical experience from the date of award of the qualification. So these are more what we call experienced candidate. So these are exempted from the registration exams. They can go straight to the oral exam and interview. All right. And then, of course, once you become a professional engineer, you have to get your practicing certificates. It's a license. You have to apply every year. The requirement is to renew your license or your certificate. You need to have CPD, continuing professional development. So you must have clock up sufficient professional development units for that purpose, you see, right? And a professional engineer may be suspended or removed from the register if you continuously don't renew your practicing certificate, let's say after 10 years, you see, So again, this is not the latest statistics. Just to give you a number, Singapore is a city-state. It's not a very big country. We don't have a lot of professional engineers, only a few thousands of them. This is the figure for, I haven't updated this is 2017, so it's quite a few years ago. But so you can see we have about a few thousand, about 4,000 number of professional engineers. And not every one of them have a practicing certificates, because some of them are not in practice. So the really active ones are maybe about, according to these statistics, in 2017 is 2,400 who are very active professional engineers with practicing certificates. And most of them are in the civil engineering discipline. Now, beyond the professional engineers, we also registered specialist professional engineers. So the specialist professional engineers will be the one that have a first degree, and then they move on to get this further specialization in geotechnical engineering, tunnel engineering, protective security engineering, depending on, again, what the government agencies require. So because we have some collapse previously in Singapore, and as a result of that, the institute further requirements, for example, geotechnical engineering and so forth. Yeah? So these are some of the specialist PE requirements. And lastly, very quickly, form of PE practices. We can provide professional engineering service as an employee, as a sole proprietor, as a partnership with a few other PEs, but also as a company, as a licensed limited liability partnership, multidiscipline partnership, licensed private limited company, and licensed private unlimited corporations as well. See. So all these companies will also have to be registered. See. So licensed corporation and partnership, for example. So this is just, again, some statistics on the corporations and partnerships that have that are registered with the Professional Engineers Board. Right? So I very quickly run through, I think in the interest of time, I've taken more than half an hour already, frankly, so apologies for this. So I will end my presentation, and I am will be happy to take any questions from the floor. So again, thank you very much for listening to me. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Chu. You are actually ahead of time. We still have about 9 minutes until your time. And what I noted here is the couple of points. In Singapore, di Singapura itu sebagai professional engineer ada privilege-nya dan ada batasan tanggung jawabnya. Jadi ada carrot dan ada sticknya. Terus yang baru saya sadarin juga ternyata di Singapura itu registration untuk PI itu malah PI bidang apa itu ditentukan oleh pemerintahnya sesuai dengan kebutuhan pemerintah. Seperti tadi Prof. Chiu bilang lebih ke masalah built environment. Nah, ini Pak Habibie, Prof. Chiu sudah bilang sebelumnya beliau ada meeting lanjutan. Apakah bisa dibuka dulu sementara 8 menit ke depan untuk Q&A untuk Prof. Chiu atau ada tanggapan dari Pak Habibie?
Ya, I think so, Pak Frankie. Let's open a question and answer session for Prof. Chiu.
Yeah, thank you.
As he has another appointment, sure.
Yeah.
Maybe if I may want to comment or raise questions, Pak Frankie, would that be okay for me?
Ya, silakan Pak.
Okay. So it is quite interesting for us to learn, to understand more on how professional engineering practice established and implemented in Singapore. Actually, we have several questions. I think the first question that you mentioned the term of PE and PE with practicing certificate. So what is actually the difference between PE and PE with practicing certificate? Is that the kind of limits on the liability and responsibility if we are only a PE? And what about if we are a PE with a practicing certificate? And the second question, it is quite interesting that you mentioned there are two types of PE exam, yeah, before we moving to the interview session. The first one is a kind of exam called a fundamental of engineering exam. This is also done in US, if I'm not mistaken. I was in Kansas for 6 months, and our team in my company on that time mentioned that they need to pass the fundamental engineering exam once they graduate, and then later on, after they have 5 years of experience, they can do they can join the PE exam, and then later they can be recognized as a PE if they pass the examination, of course. So what is exactly inside this fundamental engineering exam? Is that the kind of a basic engineering for all disciplines, for civil, mechanical, electrical, something like that? The third question, sorry, Pak Frankie, I have so many questions for Prof. Chiu.
Maybe I answer the first two first, otherwise I will forget.
Okay. Yeah. You may answer
I'll forget your first question. Yeah. Pelan-pelan, yeah, slowly, yeah. So the first question you ask, what is practicing certificate? Betul, yeah, practicing certificate. So you notice, by me, I'm a professor. I don't do submission like practicing engineer. So actually, I don't need the practicing certificate because my day-to-day job, I don't do submission of building plans to the building authority. But if you are practicing and you are doing submission to the government authority, you must have a practicing certificate. If you don't have a valid practicing certificate, a valid license, you cannot, basically you cannot also, strictly speaking, provide that service. Yeah. So in other words, long and short, everyone who are practicing should be holding a valid practicing certificate. Yeah. Then only he can provide the professional engineering service. Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. The second point about what is FEE, the Fundamental Engineering Exam, that is the first exam. You are very right, Bobby, to say that our system is similar to the American. In a way, we sort of copied also from the American system, these two exams. So the Fundamental Engineering Exam is upon graduation. So it's packed at engineering, 4-year engineering education level. In other words, anyone who has gone through university engineering education will be able to pass this exam. Yeah, so that is the level of fundamental engineering exams. But the other paper, the practice paper, you can only take afterwards, after you have a few years, 2.5 years of experience. Yeah, I hope I explained the difference between these two exams. Yeah.
Can I follow the question, please?
Yes, Pak Bambang, yes.
Yeah,
Silakan,
Pak
Pak.
Professor. So actually, the holder of practicing certificate is automatically is PE engineer, but PE engineer not necessarily practicing certificate, right?
No, practicing certificate is only after you become
After
a PE.
you become a PE.
After you become qualified already, you pass the 2 exam,
Okay.
you pass the professional interview, you already become a professional engineer, you already have the stamp, the PE stamp.
Yeah.
Then when you want to renew your practicing certificate every year, you must go and have sufficient training, continuing education program training and so forth. Then you can only renew that practicing certificate or license. People will give you a license, a piece of paper that says that from January to December of this year, this is your license.
Practicing certificate basically is just a license, right?
Yes.
Okay. So there is no exams to get it.
No, you just have to accumulate sufficient training points.
Okay.
Sufficient training, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Pak Habibie, ada pertanyaan ketiga atau masih ada 2 menit lagi?
Okay, one question from me. It's gonna be short answer for Prof. Chiu.
Okay.
What is the percentage of PE and PEPC compared to just a simple graduate of engineer in Singapore? Is that 10% of the total engineers or something like that?
About 10, yeah, not more than 15%. The PE is really at the apex of the triangle, right at the top, you know. Below there will be many engineers because we need many engineers to support a professional engineer. So I would say you're right, but maybe not more than 15%.
Prof.
Yeah,
Chiu,
okay, thank you, Pak. That's just for our information. Yeah, here in Indonesia, everybody wants to be a PE. But yeah, in other countries such as Malaysia, Singapore, and America, the percentage of PE maybe only 10 to 15% of the overall engineers. That's what I want to pass the message to all participants here. Thank you, Pak Frankie, Prof. Chiu.
Prof. Chiu, you get 1 more minute. If I may ask, there's Pak Adam Baffen is asking this question. The exam seems to be focusing on technical. What about the communication and risk assessment capabilities? How do you capture that in your...
No, the exam is not just technical. Of course, technical competency is important, but the part 1 of the professional practice paper, the second paper, yeah, the first part is on codes of conduct, ethics. Yeah, so you will have to, it's on professional code of conduct and professional ethics. So it's not technical at all. This one is also very important. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof. Chiu. If there is further question to Prof. Chiu, please submit it to us, the organizing committee. I will try to pass it on. Prof. Chiu, we understand if you have to leave, but we do hope that you can stay as long as you can.
Yeah.
Now, can I move on to second speaker, Pak Habibie?
Yes, sure, Pak. Please.
Okay. So now we move on to second speaker. This is our very own Insinyur Bambang Guritno. Obviously, everyone knows him very well here. Jadi kayaknya nggak perlu perkenalan lebih lanjut. Silakan Pak Pak Bambang. Terima kasih.
Okay, thank you, Pak Ken. Allow me to share the slides here. Okay. Okay. My turn now to present the presentation with the title PE Practice in Indonesia. Yeah, I will speak in Bahasa Inggris, but also perhaps I will mix it with Bahasa Indonesia, my own language. Yeah, I will start the presentation with the history of the why PE is important, why professional engineering is important. The history begins in the Quebec in 1907, yeah, which is 86 workers on the bridge died, yeah, 75 died, yeah. Many of them local people, famous for their high steel work. This cause of disasters that collapse occurred on the bridge, yeah, and the disaster showed that the unquestionable power of engineer could have at the time in the project that was improperly supervised. This is very important. Improperly supervised, yeah. Then as a result, John Galbraith and others formed in around 1925 what are now recognized as professional engineers. Yeah. So, and the general guidelines, include that an engineer must pass an ethical exam, be able to show good character through the use of character witnesses, and have applicable engineering experience. Yeah. In Canada, this constitutes a minimum 4 years practice under a supervision of certified PE. Yeah. Then engineers also must be registered. Yeah. These engineering organizations are regulated by the government, and the title PE is reserved only to members who belong to this organization. Okay. I will move to next. Okay. Lesson learned. Projects need to employ professional engineers and properly manage according to international project management practices. This is lesson learned from the accident in Quebec. What PE looks like now? Yeah, PE. I say I call it PEE. Yeah, PE established in 1952. Yeah, with now actually Sarjana tanks around 1 million engineers, yeah, or Sarjana Teknik, yeah. But in fact, yeah, the PE in 2021, yeah, we have only 10,000 professional engineer, yeah, under PAE, yeah, and then among of them, about 50 or 40% are civil engineer, yeah, is my organization, yeah. But the membership of PEE is about 45,000 members, yeah. So only 1/20, yeah, 1/20 of technical sarjana teknik in Indonesia is a member of PEE, yeah. We have now 152 chapters, ya cabang, and 24 region boards, ya, such as Kepulauan Riau, etc. Yeah, we have only 20 staff in Jakarta office. We have 23 colleges, badan kejuruan, and 7 committees and division. Yeah, according to the PE ADRT, yeah, anggaran dasar and anggaran rumah tangga PE, the vision of PE is promoting independence of the nation as an agent of change and development through competency development of engineering profession based on science and technology. And the mission is to build competitive engineers and to provide high added value to the welfare of prosperity of the nation. The policy and plans making PE as a national asset that is built from the development of engineering profession competence of international standard and has a strategic role in the nation. So professionalism is the main objective, and then strategic role in community and global community is the end of the objective. PE right now is having a engineering transformation in Indonesia, according to the law 11, number 11, 2014 and government regulation 25. We assume that basically it is a collective call, invitation for engineers all over Indonesia, to conduct or to perform, for the country, PE has as an implementing body of engineering profession and as a government partner in preparing engineers as human capital to support national development goals, And what kind of transformation that have been done right now, has been undertaken right now? Number one is accreditation of engineering education in the university. We know IAP, Indonesian Accreditation Board for Engineering Education. It is sponsored or conducted by PEE. And then Engineers Profession Program, PSPPE, and then PE certification system that's issuing the Engineer Professional Pratama, Engineer Professional Madhya, and Engineer Professional Utama. And then also PE conducting accreditation for engineering associations, akreditasi untuk HKK. And then PE also licensing the practice. I assume this is actually practicing certificate, in the case of Singapore, issuing STRE, Surat Tanda Registrasi Insinyur, to give permits to the engineer to practice engineering practice, and then also conducting continuous professional development, the last one is international recognition. You know that we have already a mutual recognition arrangement with Asian, with the degree Asian Ang, ACPE, and then APEC engineer. Let's now I'll show you what is the process of becoming the professional engineer in Indonesia. Begins when you are graduated from university or technical university after 4 years education, and then you come to enter to the you have to go to a professional education first. This is a regular thing, regular mechanism. So you have to go to be trained in the university, designated universities. Right now we have 43 universities assigned by the government to train graduates to become engineer, for about 1 year, consisting of 24 SKS, which is about 25% for face-to-face class meeting, and then also the rest is 75% is magang or on-the-job training. After having professional degree or engineer, then you have to go to the practicing world, dunia kerja, for about 2 years or 3 years to gain your score, or to gain your experience. So after that, you can apply engineer professional. Normally, if you have experience about 3 years, you can have a score until 600, yeah, or more. Then you can have Insinyur Profesional Pratama, IPP, yeah. And then if you have a more and more experience and having a score until 3,000, and normally you can get it in 8 years, yeah, 7 years, 8 years, you can have Insinyur Profesional Madya or IPM, yeah. And then if you have, if you continue to work in the practicing world, and then you can until 6,000 or more, then you can have IPU. Yeah, all the three Insinyur Profesional, yeah, IPP, IPM, and IPU is entitled to have STRI or Sertifikat Tanda Registrasi Insinyur. That means that the PEE will register you as Insinyur Profesional. And then what is the difference between IPP, IPM, and IPU? Oh, before that, yeah. What kind of competency standard that will be tested or will be observed over you, yeah, is there are 4 wajib, yeah, four items, 4 obligatory, yeah, code of ethics, engineering skills, planning and design, management communication. You have to fulfill this. 1, 2, 3, 4. W 1, 2, 3, 4. And then it's and then also optional. Optional is depending on the field that you are entering, yeah. You are mastering, yeah. P1 education and training. P6 is research, development, commercialization. P7 engineering, consultancy, construction, etc. Yeah. So you have to fulfill all the whole W 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you can select, or you can select the optional P5 until P11. Based on that computation, the council will evaluate and then will count your score, yeah, whether it can reach 600 or 3,000 or 6,000. And then what is the difference between this IPP, IPM, and IPU? IPP is able to conduct engineering work under supervision. So you have to be you are able to conduct engineering works, but still under supervision of IPM or IPU. But in IPM, you are able to practice independently and take full responsibility. Yeah, so you have to be responsible with your job. You are entitled to sign documents, drawings, etc. Yeah, calculation, etc. And then for IPU, they're able to practice the engineering in unique assignment or complex assignment as lead of multidisciplinary engineering work. Yeah. And then for IPM and IPU, you are entitled to obtain ACPE, APEC engineer, and ASEAN engineer. Yeah, both for IPM and IPU. After 7 years of experience with minimum 2 years in charge of significant position. Now, then basic philosophy of the PE practice in Indonesia, yeah, license to practice in many countries, yeah. PE practice is license to practice. What we practicing certificate, yeah, practicing certificate in Singapore, in the case of Singapore. And then someone needs to take responsibility for engineering deliverables prior to release for implementation, such as release for construction. Yeah, before any construction being implemented, you have to be approved by PE practicing PE, practicing PE, approved by them, by him or by her. And then as a quality assurance of the works done by engineer, all deliverables should be approved or endorsed, stamped by professional engineer. In Indonesia, STRI and SKK or SKA is two different things. Yeah. STRI is Izin Praktek Keinsinyuran or license to practice, or in Singapore, practicing certificate. But SKA or SKK is Certificate Kompetensi Kerja, work competency certificate. Normally, it's used to apply when you are entering you are applying a specific job. For instance, if there is a tender for building a dam, then you have to have a SKK or SKA with the expertise in dam, and then in road, in bridges, etc. So it is indicating the competency of the engineer in the specific field. Yeah. Then PE role as mandated by law number 1124. This general guidelines for engineering practice prepared by Engineering Standard Council or MSK, yeah, of the PEE. Yeah. Unfortunately, MSK is chaired by myself. Yeah. This guideline is set up in accordance with law number 1124 and regulates that regulates in PE. In the article 37 and in 38, PE has the function of implementing engineering practice Indonesia. Jadi menyelenggarakan keinsinyuran, ya, menyelenggarakan keinsinyuran in Indonesia. So meanwhile, 38, the duties of PII is to carry out the engineering services in accordance with standard, yeah, to control and supervise the fulfillment of the engineer's obligation, to carry out registration for engineers, to establish, implement, and enforce the code of ethics for engineers. In Article 39, PE is given authority to declare whether or not the engineer registration requirements are fulfilled by in accordance with the engineer's qualification level, to issue, extend, freeze, or cancelled engineer registration certificate if there is a violation or break the rule or break the law, and to declare whether or not a violation of engineer's code of ethics has occurred based on the results of investigation, to impose sanction on engineers. Yeah. And then it is also in the law Undang-Undang Keinsinyuran, yeah. What is the discipline according to the law? Engineering discipline. Ada kebumian, earth and energy, civil engineering and built environment, ya, teknik sipil dan lingkungan terbangun, industry, conservation and management natural resources, agriculture and agriculture product, etc. Yeah, and then the scope of engineering field according to the Article 5. Engineering technology, education and training, research and development, assessment and commercialization, consultancy, design and construction, etc. So this the above is the engineering discipline, and then below is the scope of work, yeah, which is recognized by the law. And then what is the objective of the guideline? Yeah. The guideline reflects that PE has attempted to provide legal basis and certainty for the responsible implementation of engineering, and then to provide protection to users and the public from engineering malpractice through guaranteeing and the competence and quality of works of the engineer, and then provide direction for growth and improvement of the professionalism of engineers. And then you know that engineers has a role in the national development. So it is very important. So the objective of guideline is basically very important to the national interest. This is a qualification of professional engineer in Indonesia, PE ya, PE. Professional engineer Pratama, engineer who has engineer's registration certificate. Yeah. All of them has entitled to have STRE. Yeah. STRE Pratama, the professional engineer Pratama, by law has passed the competency test. Has passed the competency test, so that he or she can be approved to hold an engineer certificate, yeah, by PEE and called professional engineer Pratama. Engineer Pratama have the right to practice engineering for engineering projects under the supervision of engineers who have already had STRE Madya or STRE Utama. And then STRE Madya or professional engineer Madya should pass the competency test so that it is entitled to hold EPM and STRE, yeah, and it calls senior professional engineer. The test must include an interview by MUK Council, yeah. MUK Council is a kind of interviewer, yeah. Council for interviewing candidates for Insinyur Profesional Madya and Insinyur Profesional Utama. Senior professional engineer have the right to carry out and have the right to issue approval of engineering. Then this last one is Insinyur Profesional Utama with STRE Utama. This is the same test but higher level, because the requirements is higher than Insinyur Profesional Madya. Yeah, executive professional engineers have the right to carry out engineering practices for engineering projects independently and have the right to issue ratification of engineering technical documents. Executive IPU, yeah, also get to be responsible for multidisciplinary engineering if they serve as a project director, chief engineer, project manager, project engineer, and engineering manager on a project. Yeah, this is a professional responsibility of PE, which which include obligation to comply with all standards, technical, legal, professional, ethical standard, and maintain professional status as a professional engineer. And then engineers in their capacity are individuals who carrying out engineering practice and are required to fulfill all their obligations in connection with engineering services being provided to users. Based on the ethical code, a professional engineer, a PE will execute engineering practice strictly according to his or her competence. So if you are civil engineer, you are not entitled to do other discipline, engineering discipline. Or if you are road engineer and then you are doing the other dam engineer, you are not entitled to do that. Yeah. So and then they have also obligation to commit to complete her or his professional responsibility without delay, raise or additional expenses to the client. Yeah. Sanction, this is very important because according to the law, there is a sanction. Any non-engineer who carries out engineering practices and acts as professional engineer as recorded in law shall be sentenced to a maximum of 2 years or maximum fine of 200 million rupiah. Means that sometimes you want a non-engineer carrying out building a bridge, building a residential, etc. Yeah, but if the act already acted, yeah, if the law already acted, so they are not allowed to do that, yeah, because it can be penalty, can be a penalty, can be sentence, yeah, can be penalty can be implied, yeah. Any non-engineer who carries out engineering practices and acts as professional engineer, as regulated in the law, resulting in an accident, disability, and loss of person's life, the sentence is bigger or longer, can be sentenced in imprisonment in the jail for a maximum 10 years or a maximum fine of 1 billion rupees. And then Article 51, yeah. Engineer who has obtained engineer registration certificate, yeah, and carry out engineering activities that causes material losses is subject to administrative sanction. The administrative sanction referred to may be in the form of a written warning, fine, temporary suspension of engineering activities, freezing of engineer registration certificate, and revocation of engineer registration certificate.
Permisi Pak Bambang, ada 2 menit lagi Pak, masih ada 2 menit lagi.
Okay, I will. This is the kind of sanction and penalty, and then this is a matrix of indicating engineer possible position. Yeah, engineer position in consulting firm, in the supervising consulting firm, and the contractor, etc. Yeah. Professional engineers practicing individually can also doing the job for other company who has no professional engineer, yeah, by receiving assignment from them and then signing for them, yeah. Of course, have to be checked by them, by professional engineer. Responsibility by professional engineer. And then this is the PE STEM is something new for Indonesia, and we have to start to introduce to apply this PE STEM into our practice. Yeah, this is PE guidelines. Yeah, PE practice guidelines. Then it is important. Yeah, every engineer has 2 types of STEM, namely STEM used by project manager or project director that includes multidisciplinary technical documents. And the type 2 is STEM used by a particular discipline engineer to certify technical documents. Yeah. This is a PE practice guidelines that we have developed. Yeah. Then integrated pack is as a professional engineer. As a professional engineer, we have to sign integrated pack, yeah, which committed to this, to follow this, to follow, to apply this pact. Yeah, this is the example of engineering practice. Okay, thank you very much, and hopefully we can have a response from audience, yeah, to improve or to speed up or to accelerate our penyelenggaraan keinsinyuran in Indonesia. Thank you very much, moderator. Now I return this time to you. Yeah, thank you.
Terima kasih Pak Bambang. Jadi sangat menarik tadi. Secara rangkuman sebenarnya ada mirror ya antara PI Singapura sama PI Indonesia, tapi mungkin dibahas nanti. Pak Habibie, saya izin ke speaker ketiga.
Silakan Pak.
Oke, makasih Pak. Oke, sekarang saya introduce speaker ketiga adalah Angelin Chan. Beliau adalah chairman dari DP Group. Ini adalah perusahaan konsultan multidisciplinary di Singapura, salah satu terbesar di Asia Tenggara. Saya berkesempatan pernah berkolaborasi dan di guidance oleh Angeline sendiri pada berkolaborasi dalam beberapa proyek. Jadi ini adalah salah satu perusahaan yang terbesar di Asia Tenggara dan akan berbagi sekarang lebih ke aspek praktikal di mana PE ini benefit untuk perusahaan-perusahaan. Angeline, thank you very much for joining us. The time is yours.
Thank you, Frankie. Very good afternoon. Bapak-bapak dan ibu-ibu insinyur yang terhormat, selamat siang. Salam sejahtera buat kita semua. Pertama-tama, saya ingin menyampaikan ucapan terima kasih kepada Persatuan Insinyur Indonesia yang telah mengundang saya untuk menjadi salah satu pembicara di seminar ini. Senang sekali saya dapat hadir dan bertemu anda semua di seminar ini. So, rapid urban development and technological advancement are reshaping the way we practice in the building industry, bringing exciting opportunities, but also increasing liabilities for us all. So today I will be discussing the importance of certification, competence, and continuing education in the dynamic practice landscape, and how professional development enhances resilience of the building industry and contributes to an excellent and safe built environment. I've been asked to speak from a practitioner and business organization point of view. So let me start by introducing myself and the company that I represent. So as Frankie introduced, my name is Angeline Chan. I'm the chairman of DP Architects and its group of companies. This photo here shows you our DP gathering, where we get together every year to share and to learn from each other. The practice was founded in 1967 and headquartered in Singapore. I finished architecture school in 1987, got my architect's license in 1994, and have been designing and leading projects in Singapore and abroad ever since. I sit on the board of architects, the statutory authority that regulates the practice of architecture in Singapore. And in 2019, I was invited to join the Professional Engineers Board as a representative from the Board of Architects to facilitate better communication and cooperation between the two closely connected disciplines. Now, a little bit about DP Architects. We're an architecture-led multidisciplinary design practice with 16 offices strategically linked from Shanghai to London. We have 8 specialist consultancies, including an engineering practice. We have 900 employees around the world, and we practice as one global studio. As a pioneering homegrown practice in Singapore, we are the proud architects behind notable projects like this, Esplanade Theatres of the Bay, which is a world-class performance arts center, Resorts World Sentosa, a mixed development that includes Universal Studios theme park, a marine life park, maritime museum, a casino, and 6 hotels, Singapore Sports Hub, the world's largest integrated sports and community development of its kind, and Sengkang Hospital Campus, a 1,400-bed public hospital designed with principles of well-being architecture. Outside of Singapore, we've been involved in projects in over 70 countries. To name a few, we've done the Dubai Mall, one of the largest and most visited mall in the world. Guangzhou Knowledge City in China, an iconic master plan development for a model future city. Ima Square Mall, a large-scale street life-inspired retail and entertainment destination in Istanbul. And RMZ Eco World, a leading tech park development in Bangalore, which is the Silicon Valley of India. So since 1990, DP has been fortunate to contribute to the vibrant built landscape of 22 Indonesian cities. This is a photo of the Jakarta skyline, and this photo marks all the buildings that we designed in Jakarta. Some of our notable projects include Senayan City, Central Park, Kemang Village, Ciputra World Surabaya, Trans Hotel Bandung, and Trans Mall Makassar. Some of the Indonesian projects that we are currently working on include Voco Hotel in Jakarta, Collins Boulevard in Serpong, Tangerang, Arumaya Apartments and Garden Villas in Jakarta, and the hotel, retail, dining, and entertainment component in MNC Lido City Theme Park. Indonesian talents make up a sizable portion of DP's diverse workforce. 7% of DPians hail from Indonesia. The purpose of this short introduction is to paint the background that informs my sharing today. Each country, each organization is bound by its own complexities. So I can only relate my perspective as a Singapore-based practitioner. To begin, let's go back 35 years to the mid-80s. Singapore was undergoing rapid urban development. The country's mass rapid transit or MRT system, the first and most extensive in Southeast Asia, was underway. Building projects were growing in scale and complexity. DP was working on all the buildings in Marina Center, projects that were built on newly reclaimed land. All the buildings that you see in this photo are done by DP architects. Although Singapore was facing its first post-independent recession in 1985, there was a palpable sense of progress and of moving forward. However, in 1986, Singapore experienced one of its worst disasters in post-war years, the collapse of Hotel New World. In less than 60 seconds, the 6-story building crumbled into a pile of rubble. Not a single wall or column was left standing. This event cast a gloom over the progress we had made in the built environment and brought significant change to the laws governing the engineering and building professions. In the inquiry that followed, an error was found in the calculation of the structural load. The building could not support its own weight, let alone the weight of later additions. This error cost 33 lives. And the people who did the structural and architectural drawings were found to be unqualified draftsmen. The disaster changed the building practice landscape in Singapore. The government took on a more active role in the building industry. New laws were passed with stringent standards in the reviewing, testing, and supervising of structural works. Accredited checkers were introduced to verify drawings. Maintenance checks on building every 5 years became mandatory. For myself, an aspiring architect about to finish architecture school then, it drove home the responsibilities and liabilities of the profession that I've chosen. The reason for building laws and professional certification is simple. It is to protect the safety and welfare of the public. As I matured as an architect, I appreciated more and more the rigor of the exams that I had been put through and the strict requirements to obtain and retain my practicing license. Without the hard-earned professional knowledge and skills, I would not have the competence and confidence to push design boundaries, meet our clients' increasingly complex demands, and collaborate on equal footing with an ever-widening spectrum of technical experts, both in Singapore and abroad. And as buildings become bigger, taller, more complex, and even gravity-defying, I also appreciated more and more the collaboration between architecture and engineering, and how critical it is for these two disciplines to meet in the early stage of a project. The architect may take on a broader scope. We design the building, we play the part of interlocutor, we coordinate the needs of the building owner with the practicalities of the authorities, consultants, and builders. But we rely on our engineering counterparts' technical mastery and understanding of the structural performance. While the attention tends to fall on architects, an architect's imagination and creativity has to be held up by engineering wizardry. So one could say that engineering liability stakes are higher. The fact is that the error margin for structural engineering is 0. From the built environment and public safety standpoint, certification is necessary to restrict the practice to only qualified individuals. However, the hours are long to study, to work, and to take exams just to obtain the license. But this license is necessary to recognize the professional engineer. Your solid engineering knowledge and professional judgment would be valued and recognized. Of course, the legal responsibilities are greater, but so are the rewards and recognition. In architecture, one can achieve success and even fame as a designer without going to architecture school or becoming a licensed practitioner, like these gentlemen on this slide. But if you want to reach the pinnacle of the engineering profession, that is not an option. In my 30-year career, I have had opportunities to collaborate with designers who are not architects. I've also worked with foreign architects unfamiliar with the local practice landscape. I've also been the foreign design architect abroad, where I'm the one unfamiliar with the local regulations. We all know that designing within limitations, such as building codes and standards, actually forces one to be creative. The knowledge of these technical regulations, far from being constrained, in fact sharpens your professional analysis and pushes innovation and outside the box thinking. For engineering, this is arguably even more so. Engineering is a profession where you will get to exercise creativity and solve problems every day. If you relish creative challenges, problem solving, and making a difference to the world, then being a professional engineer will give you tremendous fulfillment. Having had the opportunities to work in many countries, I've had different experiences in different practice landscapes. In a highly regulated built environment like Singapore, it is clear who the decision maker is in the construction process. If I need to change the design or add a basement or a floor, I know who to talk to straight away. The qualified engineer knows his stuff and is the one who can advise decisively if it's possible or not, saving a lot of time and resources. Especially for design changes when construction has already begun, the consultation with the qualified engineer is even more critical. In some countries that I worked in, it isn't always clear who the decision maker is. There were times I ended up speaking to the big boss of the engineering firm who wasn't the project's qualified engineer, who didn't know the ins and outs to make a swift and safe decision. This can be frustrating when working within a compressed time frame. To overcome this problem, we will consult DP's own engineering specialists, DP engineers, to help us make the best design decisions. This is one of the reasons why we established our own engineering practice. It is a business strategy to provide holistic solutions in our design work and to offer sought-after capabilities in developing regions. It is also a way to circumvent limitations in consultancy setups without compromising the integrity of our design. The built environment sector is so dynamic. The way we practice is changing so quickly. This is further accelerated by technology and influenced by factors outside the immediate realms of architecture or engineering. Becoming a certified professional will equip us with specialized knowledge and skills to navigate these changes. And as we continue to increase our knowledge and acquire more experience, we will adapt nimbly to prevailing challenges of the industry and be ready to undertake new ventures of greater engineering complexity. So certification basically validates the professional proficiency of an individual. However, to elevate the professional proficiency of the entire industry, to raise the bar for design excellence, to improve the quality and safety of construction, and to advance a remarkable built environment, the building industry will have to achieve a critical mass of certified professionals and acquire new competencies and a high standard of expertise across the building profession. In tandem with the development of a country's economy and urban environment, deeper specializations will be required and new competencies will have to be mastered to support evolving needs. Look at China. In the last decade, it has become the undisputed leader in high-speed rail technology and engineering. The sheer scale of development and the collaboration with rail engineering giants from Europe and from Japan has given China the exposure and the experience needed to become a world leader in this field. In Singapore, as our urban environment becomes increasingly built up, underground construction becomes highly sensitive to safety and workmanship. Future underground infrastructure and interfacing with existing subterranean structures have increased the complexity of construction and the demand for tunneling expertise. Last year, the Professional Engineering Board of Singapore introduced a certification for specialist professional engineer in tunneling to increase the safety standards in tunneling works. This expertise complements other existing ones, such as geotechnical and blast engineering. These related specializations not only make construction safer, but they also differentiate specialist engineers and earn them better remuneration and recognition. For Singapore, not only will having a pool of certified tunneling specialists hone local competency in this specialized field, it would also help to position our country as a center of excellence for tunneling works in the region. As MRT Jakarta is embarking on an expansion of its subway lines, Jakarta too will see a demand for tunneling specialists and build expertise in this engineering field. And from DP's experience, it was through exposure and collaboration that we acquired the capabilities to undertake increasingly more complex and technical developments of our own. The growth of the built environment sector during Singapore's formative years laid the groundwork for a new generation of homegrown architects, engineers, and building professionals to develop technical expertise and evolve our own design identity. It also led to the development of a comprehensive set of codes, rules, and regulations, as well as compliance processes to ensure safe and resilient buildings and construction. In the mid-80s and 90s, DP took on a number of large-scale developments, which are collaborations with foreign specialists. By the 2000s, DP was able to apply the knowledge and skills we have acquired to mega projects and new integrated typologies on billion-dollar projects, such as the Dubai Mall, Resorts World Sentosa, and Singapore Sports Hub, while still continuing to grow our own capabilities. If DP did not have the early opportunities to work on complex projects and acquire new expertise, we would not have grown to be the practice that we are today. And we would not have expanded our business to new and developing markets. I recall in particular Dolphin Plaza, a luxury residential project in Hanoi that I worked on in 2008. I designed the two towers to look and feel like they were floating lightly above the built mass. To achieve this, a transfer floor with a long span structure of 60 meters, the longest in Vietnam at that time, was needed. However, the local engineers were unable to construct the transfer slabs of this scale. They did not have prior experience on this. But we took on the challenge and worked with engineers from Singapore and our Vietnamese counterparts to make this happen. Getting the development to look like how we designed it without compromising structural integrity is one of the key successes of this project. This experience in part inspired us to establish DP Engineers to provide this needed expertise in the developing markets. Valuable experiences such as these supported the diversification of DP as a multidisciplinary practice and allowed us to expand into many specialty services to support the architectural core. Continuous education. The aspiration to continuously raise our capabilities and be at the industry's forefront is something that DP cultivates in our people. We groom our young talents towards professional certification. We grant training and exam leave. We pay for professional membership and license fees. Every department and every staff are allocated a yearly training budget to upgrade themselves. To support continuous development, we started our own training institution called DP Academy. The mission of DP Academy is to expand and deepen the skill sets of DPians, to facilitate the transfer of knowledge among our teams, and to inculcate the lifelong learning mindset. We believe that this mindset is essential for the development of not only our employees, but critical to the growth of the firm, and by extension, the larger industry. In Singapore, like most countries, professional engineers are required by law to undertake a set number of hours in continuous professional development every year in order to renew their license. This stipulation underlines the need for continuous education and contributes to the rising standards of professional engineers in Singapore. At DP, we too see continuous education as essential. It is a way for businesses to build resilience and continuity by acquiring and developing serious competencies to stay relevant, to innovate, and to maintain a competitive edge. At DP, we have a structured way to support this. We devise a skills and competency framework to chart the progress of each and every employee. Through this framework, our employees can identify the skills and qualifications they must acquire to reach their career goals. DP Academy develops relevant courses to impart the skills and fill the knowledge gaps of our employees. Some of the enhanced programs in the past year included lectures on new developments in design for manufacturing and assembly, and green, sustainable, and digital design. As one of Singapore's largest architectural practice, it is necessary that we groom and retain a pool of licensed practitioners and skilled talents. Having a pool of cross-disciplinary experts also helps us to achieve greater integration in our designs with improved efficiency and excellence in delivery. DP believes in investing and developing the potential of our human resource. The concerted effort to provide a conducive learning environment and build expertise in related disciplines raises the capabilities of our firm as a whole, and in the bigger picture, contribute to the advancement and dynamism of our industry. In closing, I would like to say that Indonesia and Singapore are two very different countries that don't lend themselves to easy comparison. Different approaches are needed to advance and govern professional practice in our two countries. Singapore is one small island, whereas Indonesia is made up of 17,508 islands. Because of Singapore's small land area, we are already highly urbanized and built up. And because of a lack of natural resources, we rely on innovation and human capital for our development. Indonesia is the largest economy in Southeast Asia. The potential for growth is tremendous, and there is a huge demand for infrastructure development and construction works fueled by urbanization. In Indonesia, the stages of urban development, building types, and specifications vary from North Sumatra to Jakarta to West Papua. The rigor of engineering education and training may also vary by region, which makes a national standard for professional engineering certification even more critical. Notwithstanding their differences, it is beyond dispute that professional engineering law not only safeguards life, property, and welfare of the public, it furthers the discipline, deepens the public's appreciation of the profession, and enhances the capabilities of local talents and firms, which in turn improves the quality of the built environment and the quality of life. With transformative changes taking place in the built industry, we need to stay relevant or risk being left behind. In my 30 years, I have seen the laws getting stricter, our practice getting increasingly tougher, and certification exams getting harder. So my parting words, for those still hesitant about getting certified, take the exam, get certified. The rewards are immeasurable. Thank you. Terima kasih atas perhatian Anda.
Terima kasih, Ms. Chan. Very inspirative. Jadi yang bisa saya tarik dari yang tadi, Pak, ini katalis dari Singapura, satu event di Singapura yang membuat bolanya bergulir sehingga terbentuk peraturan-peraturan PI segala macam yang malah setelah beberapa dekade berjalan membawa Singapura dan bahkan perusahaan-perusahaan seperti DPA menjadi salah satu yang terbaik di dunia atau di Asia Tenggara ya. Dan sehingga tapi apabila dilihat bisa dilihat di DP sendiri bahkan dijadikan culture untuk progres karirnya. Mereka perlu ada seperti IPP, IPM, IPU yang bahkan bisa di mirror, Pak. Itu sih dari saya, Pak. Ada tanggapan dari Pak Habibie dan Pak Bambang sebelum kita move on ke speaker terakhir?
Bagus, menarik ya, menarik, bagus sekali. Kita perlu belajar dari Singapura ya. Kita perlu belajar dari Singapura apa yang dipraktekkan di sana. Oke, menarik sekali, interesting.
Pak Habibie, ada tanggapan 2 menit sebelum kita ke Pak Sasa Popovic?
Only the closing remark from Angeline. So don't hesitate to get the exam, license, and get rewarded. So we need to get rewarded as a PE. I think this is still a big homework for us, yeah, to make sure that the engineering law can be fully implemented here in Indonesia, so we can get rewarded. Thank you. Yeah, we can continue to the next speaker.
Itu message yang kita selalu dapat ya Pak, sebagai PE ada obligation-nya dan ada reward-nya, tapi kayaknya reward-nya selalu lebih besar daripada Oke. Terima kasih kembali Miss Chan. Sekarang kita akan move on ke speaker kita terakhir. Jadi tadi Miss Angeline Chan sudah memberikan viewpoint secara praktikal sebagai company yang sangat besar dari Singapura. Sekarang kita akan zoom in ke personal perspective dari engineer Sasa Popovic. Beliau ini license di 4 negara, Kanada, Serbia, UAE, Dubai, dan UK. Jadi silakan. Sorry. Hi Sasa. Sorry. Yeah. So.
Hi Frankie.
You're okay? Are you a co-host? Okay. So I'll let you do the presentation.
Yeah. Thanks, Frankie. Good afternoon, all. Thank you, Indonesian Professional Engineering Institution, for organizing this seminar. Thank you to all attendees, and thank you, Ken, for asking me to contribute. So I'll start sharing the screen. And it should be, I think, share it to, please let me know. You should see the full screen now. I'm not sure.
Yes,
you can.
Yes, already.
We are
the full screen or
no? It's the PowerPoint.
The backdrop.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me try again. So share screen. I think it should be the same, but it should be able to switch it to the full screen. Okay, can you see the full screen now?
It is now.
Yes, excellent. Okay, again, thank you. I'll just have to change a few things here. Okay, again, thank you for having me. First, before I start, my name is Sasha Popovic. As Ken said, I'm a structural engineer by profession. I graduated from Belgrade University, Serbia, back in 1991, and then moved on through my career through different places, different continents, and really had the pleasure and privilege of enjoying structural engineering to its fullest. I'm currently director at Whitby Wood Popovich. That's a sister company of Whitby Wood practice in the UK. And some of you might heard about Mark Whitby and Whitby Bird, who practiced in the past. So that's one of the offshoots of his previous companies. Before I start, I just want to say that my talk is limited to licensing within the engineering profession only. So I won't be talking about the other professions, at least not much. And specifically that's related to the structural engineering, being structural engineer myself. Other engineering practices are very similar, particularly in places like USA or Canada, for example. With some very slight differences, even the title is in many places exactly the same. i.e. it's a professional engineer or PE without a special remark as to which profession or which specialty it applies. And also before I go deeper into my presentation, I just want to say that I'm not part of any engineering associations or institutions board. And that these views that I'm expressing here are based on my personal experiences and are my personal views. So they're not views of any association or any institution. During this presentation, I will talk about why registering in my view. I'll give a brief history about registration through examples of the UK, USA, and Canada. I thought that these three places would be interesting to the public, to the audience, and also having personal experience from Canada and UK, I thought I could maybe shed some light on how registration process works in these places. I would also touch a little bit on self-regulation versus government regulation in the profession, on examples of USA and Canada. I will then talk a little bit about code of ethics, and then I'll go through my personal professional experience in Serbia, Canada, UK, Dubai, and now back in Serbia again. Then I'll may say a few words about whether regulator is better than unregulated, and what are the benefits of being a professional engineer, again, in my personal opinion.
Excuse me, Sasa.
So, yes.
Okay. No, I thought that your slides has not changed. Okay.
No, they changed. I just want to give a brief as to what I'm going to talk about. So the first point is really, whenever I do something, I tend to ask myself, why are we doing this? And so I thought it would be important to give you my perspective of why I think it is important to have a professional regulation. And I think that if you want to provide a single answer, the answer would be that you want to reduce risk of harm to general public. You can see here on these images only few of structural failures that were fairly catastrophic. One on the top left is well-known Tacoma Narrows Bridge collapse of its main span. Luckily, I don't think there were any deaths in it, because it took quite a long time for the bridge to collapse. Unlike the Hyatt Regency on the bottom left corner, that was in Kansas City, Missouri, in the United States, where there were many, over 100 deaths due to the collapse of a walkway, due to what turned out to be a very simple engineering mistake. And then another one that was also quite important for the structural engineering practice was a failure in the UK of that was called Ronan Point, I believe. It was a tower block in Canning Town in Newham, which is part of East London, that partially collapsed in 1968, only 2 months after it was erected. And that led to some changes in the way we practice. The difference between engineering and other professions is that engineering affects everyone. Unlike dentists or doctors or lawyers that in many cases affect only a few people, unless there is some class action or pandemic like we have now, where it does affect more people. In most cases, these other professions they affect single people, whereas in engineering profession we affect everyone. And also there is a very high harm potential, because failure of a dam, for example, could really affect many people and economies of the countries. So not only directly, but through the economy in many other ways. So what we are trying to prevent with professional regulation, these are some points, 4 points: negligence, incompetence, malpractice, and unethical practice. So being part of a regulated profession, you cannot eliminate necessarily these; they still occur, but you do have a powerful tool in eliminating or minimizing occurrence of these. Some of them are part of a broader culture, for example, unethical practices, or even negligence or malpractice. But institutions are or associations, engineering associations, are a very important part of trying to eliminate these occurrences. So now I'll talk a little bit about history of engineering regulation. In the United Kingdom, this is actually the first worldwide institution was formed in 1818, and that was the Institution of Civil Engineers. The first president was famous Thomas Telford, famous UK and world-renowned engineer, who was put into that position in 1820. And the idea was actually in the first 2 years, the institution wasn't really popular, so he was asked to become a president and try to popularize it. He was very successful in that. In 1828, the institution got its royal charter. As I mentioned, it's the oldest institution, actually, engineering institution. However, it's very important to mention that in the UK, actually, the engineering is not regulated. So there are institutions like Institution of Civil Engineer that was mentioned here, Institution of Structural Engineers, which I'm a member of, but they are not regulating the profession. So you do not need to be a member of these institutions to practice engineering in the UK, even though being a member has great advantages and recognitions and knowledgeable clients like architects and developers do ask for professional engineers or chartered engineers to be on their teams, but strictly speaking, you do not need to be registered. In the United States, the first state actually to introduce licensing was Wyoming in 1907, and that was a result of many submissions for, in this case, I believe it was related to irrigation and water issues that they had in the state. So many submissions were actually to the authorities were provided by lawyers or generally people who were not within the profession, like notaries, lawyers, maybe even doctors, I believe. But and they were very poor, obviously, because they were not qualified to deal with these issues. And to stop that practice, they introduced engineering licensing in the state. And then it was followed by other states like Louisiana, Florida, Illinois, and the last one was actually not that long ago, 1947, Montana. All of these are regulated by state laws, and I will touch a little bit more upon that a little bit later when I talk about difference between regulated and self-regulated institutions or associations. And lastly, at least from the point of view of this presentation, in terms of the history of engineering regulation, in Canada, the first act that was enacted to regulate the engineering was passed in Manitoba in actually 1896, so quite a long time ago, but it was very difficult to enforce in that time. So in 1920, Manitoba, which is one of the provinces in Canada, together with other provinces such as Alberta, British Columbia, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, and Quebec, introduced provincial engineering regulatory bodies, which were in charge of regulating engineering in these provinces. As I mentioned before, unlike the USA, Canada has a self-regulated profession. And I'll explain differences a little bit and what that means. So now, general registration procedure. This I think important for for the candidates who are considering registering with the Indonesian professional institution. So so you can get a feel about similarities and differences. So in the UK, first you have to have an accredited MEng degree. Until recently, you could pass by Bachelor of Engineering degree, but they raised the bar, and now one has to be Master of Engineering. Now I'm talking about becoming a member as a Meister T, because they have a different, which means member of Institution of Structural Engineers, because they do have different grades. So one can still register as an associate member of the institution or as a technician without having obviously a MEng degree. So once your degree is accredited, and the degrees that can be accredited are many degrees from the UK, not all of them. Then many degrees from the European universities or other universities that are part of certain international bodies that recognize or accredit universities. So they're fairly open, but strict as well at the same time. So once your degree is accredited, you need to go and go through the initial professional development, complete it, and demonstrate your abilities. And they're not only technicals. You have also to demonstrate that you have good communication skills, that you have site experience, that you have management and planning skills, that you have appreciation for construction, economy and costs, environment, etc. And again, these are becoming wider and wider, and it's becoming more and more difficult to actually register and prove these. So as the society gets more complex. Once you go through this initial professional development, you have to demonstrate that you have appreciation, knowledge, experience, and ability to practice as an engineer, or to be chartered, to become a chartered engineer. And once you demonstrate this through an interview, you then go through a very, very strict professional exam. It's a 7-hour-long exam plus short, I believe, half-an-hour break. And whoever took this exam knows that it's very, very, very tough and demanding. Now, there are many competent engineers that didn't pass this exam. Actually, I know some very, very strong engineers who were PhDs back in Canada who tried the exam and after third attempt didn't pass. That doesn't mean that they are not competent. So what Institution of Structural Engineers is saying is that if you pass the exam, you're proving your competence. But unfortunately, if you're competent, it doesn't mean that you will pass it. And I think this is one of the disadvantages of the registration in general. I don't have many disadvantages, but I think this is one, because you may be very, very strong engineer, but just don't have skill to write exam, and then that can really hamper you. Now going to the United States, and becoming a professional engineer there, there are similar steps. So you have to graduate from an accredited 4-year college or university in the States, or again, emphasis here is on accredited. You can obviously graduate from foreign universities as well, but you need to, in a similar ways, in the UK, you need to prove that through different international bodies that your degree is worthwhile. Then after that, you need to complete the standard fundamentals of engineering written examination, and then you become an engineer in training by passing these 2 steps. After that, you need to gain 4 years of experience, engineering experience, not any experience. And I think in some states they might have raised the bars to 5 years possibly, but when I was practicing there, it was 4 years of experience. Those years are pretty much certified by your peer references, who are always professional engineers, who have to be professional engineers, and then you also have to write an exam which is called write and pass, obviously, an exam which is called Principles and Practice in Engineering, as well as an ethics exam. Canada, very similar. So academic credentials, minimum 4 years of experience, and then you have to demonstrate language competency, good character, and to pass law and ethics professional practicing exam. So based on my experience, their technical exam required to become at least a professional engineer is not as strict and as strong as the one in the UK and the United States. The emphasis is more on experience, and then as well as on language competency, good character, and passing the law and ethics exam. Now going to the state regulation versus self-regulation. So as I mentioned, in the United States, there is the direct government regulation. So the regulation, the profession is left in the hands of the governments. So it's a completely independent body from the professionals. From that point of view, it's less prone to corruption because it's unlinked, but it's at the same time somewhat inert and irresponsive because it's not governed by those who are knowledgeable and experienced within the industry. Now in Canada, the government actually delegates associations, provincial associations, that then self-regulate the profession, and parts of these associations are typically people from mature professionals from the industry. And by doing this delegation, the government actually recognizes that profession is mature and able to govern themselves or itself. At the same time, this is privilege, but also it's a burden because there is onus on these associations to keep a really, really high standard throughout at all time, because this delegation could always be revoked. The risks are that, even though I really haven't experienced this while practicing in Canada, but the risks always exist if you implement this system in less mature societies, that they could lead to corruption in some societies, but also even in Canada that could be perceived conflict of interest, in that when you're trying to reprimand and question some potentially unethical works of others, then the wider society who was affected by that unprofessional conduct can, in a way that the procedures are going, can wrongly, in my opinion, think that there is a conflict of interest, and that the professional body is siding with an engineer as someone of their own. I will talk a little bit about code of ethics, because in my personal opinion, in addition to demonstrating all of the technical and soft skills, this is very important. One has to really understand this and abide by those. And these are very similar in when you go through let's say USA or UK or Canada. So, first one is demonstrating honesty and integrity in whatever you do. So one has to really transpire as a reliable and trustworthy person, to respect confidentiality, to declare conflict of interest, to understand reputation of others as well, not only of its own, and be really careful about how and what is in which way is said about others, etc. And obviously the very important one is reject bribery and improper influence. The second group of these code of ethics points is one needs to have respect for life, law, and environment, as well as the general good of public. And the key one, this is actually the first one in Canadian code of ethics, is that one needs to hold the paramount the health and safety of general public and environment. And then there are other points here. This is, I think, visually recorded, so the audience is welcome to read. I won't read through these in more detail. Then the third group of the points is accuracy and rigor. So we always have to work with care and perform the services only in areas for which we are competent at. And what I learned through many years of practice, and actually fairly early when I was going through the first registration in abroad from Serbia in Canada, that it's actually important knowing what you don't know. That's actually more important than knowing what you know. And it's not it's easier said than done, because it's a very thin line between being scared and exploring new fields, and putting that boundary as to what you don't know. And I think a good compromise in working with those is going and exploring new boundaries, but having people around you who can support you and give you honest, independent opinion and review and give you comments on your work. And then lastly, the fourth group of these code of ethics comments is leadership and communication, mentoring the younger colleagues as well. Promote good environment at your workplace, and support the diversity of all and inclusion of all kinds. The following slide is just the code of ethics from the what's called now Engineers and Geoscientists of British Columbia. That's a province in Canada. They used to be called Association of Professional Engineers and Geoscientists of British Columbia, but they shortened the name recently. So they have 13 commandments, if you will. And I'll just go quickly. The first one is, as I mentioned before, just hold paramount the safety, health, and welfare of the public. Second one is practice only in those fields where you're professionally competent. Third one, have regard for the law. Fourth one, have regard for standards, codes, etc. Fifth one is maintain your competence, and this is related to continuing professional development. The sixth one is provide accurate information based on the facts. Seventh one, linked to that, is distinguish between the facts, assumptions, and personal opinions. Eighth one, avoid conflict of interest and disclose when these might be perceived as such. Then the ninth one, report actions that could harm the environment or the public. So in other words, if you know that someone is doing something that could hurt environment or the public, you shouldn't be quiet about that, and you should disclose that, so that harm could be prevented. Then the 10th one is one needs to clearly present consequences of his or her professional decisions or judgments if these are or overruled or disregarded by the clients. The last three were added recently. Actually, there used to be only 10 commandments, and they were incorporated in to some extent in different in the first 10 points. So the first one of those additional ones is the one praise where your colleagues or others when the credit is due. So in other words, don't take all the credit for yourself and blame others when the things go wrong, but be fair and honest about these. Undertake the work with due diligence. This is, I think, mentioned and already covered by others to some extent. And then the last one, conduct yourself with fairness, courtesy, and good faith. So I think that this is how much I want to say about these three associations or institutions in terms of, or three countries in terms of the history, and then in terms of the how actually they go about registering professional engineers. Now I'll tell you a little bit about myself and about my professional experience and what I feel about registering through all of these associations. And by the way, I don't do this for as a hobby. You know, it's a really hard work getting registered, but you know, the life took me through these different places, and in order to practice as an engineer in those places, I went through the registration process. So as I mentioned, I graduated in 1991 from the Faculty of Civil Engineering, University of Belgrade, and that gave me a degree. This is similar to what the Germans would call Diplom-Ing, for example. It's a 5-year. It was a 5-year program at that time. It's a little bit different now. At the time, we didn't have bachelors of engineering or masters of engineering. We had diplom engineers, and then we had masters of science, and obviously doctors of philosophy or PhD.
Give me some. We have 3 minutes remaining.
Oh, okay, I'll go quickly. I do apologize. So then from there, this took me to writing a professional state license exam in Serbia, which I've done in 1994. I went from there to Canada and registered as first in engineering training, having worked on many interesting projects like this one here, which is Vancouver Airport, or their terminal in Horseshoe Bay, ferry terminal in Horseshoe Bay. I then registered as a professional engineer in British Columbia, Canada. So this was 1996. Again, continued to work on many interesting projects. This was Douglas border crossing. Again, continued to work on international airports. Then this was I-Court building for medical facility for research in with the spinal cord injuries, university buildings, etc. Then in 2005, I did write ISTRT exam and become a member. This was, I was still in Canada, and became a member of the Institution of Structural Engineers in the UK. And in the same year, I wrote another exam, a BC Code exam, to become structural engineer. This was similar to the Western states in the US, like California, where due to the seismic regions, seismic issues, one needs to get registered as a structure eng. I moved to the UK. It was very, very useful to be already a member of ISTRT, and was again privileged and lucky to work on Mall of Egypt, the Q building in Birmingham, and as a reviewer for the client on the Leadenhall building in London. Then in 2014, I moved to Dubai, and I registered with the Dubai Society of Engineers, worked on many interesting projects. The most notable one is UAE Pavilion, which is just tomorrow is opening for the Dubai Expo, where this building will be one of the key buildings on the pavilion, on the Expo site. And then I moved back recently to Serbia. I'm now director of Whitby Wood, which is based in London, and is with sister companies in India and Serbia. Again, we as a practice, we do many interesting projects, but I won't go through that now. So just as the last or next to last slide, I want to give you my personal view on registration. First, it's getting harder and harder to get registered. So do this as soon as you can, because every next year will be more and more difficult. Pros, in my opinion: de-risking de-risking the profession, creating level playing field for all the practitioners. You're setting the minimum standards that needs to be achieved, and you're promoting by imposing registration, you're promoting healthy competition. The quality and wealth of the nations inevitably increase with this process. General cons: in small numbers, you can remove by doing this competent people, because there may be some that just may be coming from different place with somewhat poor language knowledge that won't be able to register. Could be restrictive a little bit in terms of entry requirements, and you can also deter some young students from going into the profession if you're not careful about that. But I think this is really minority of the people. Now, from the personal point of view, it did increase my awareness and general skill set and made me a better professional. it definitely brought sense of achievement and pride, and it allowed me really to practice and work on many interesting projects throughout the world. Without that, I'm sure I wouldn't be able to do so. Cons, the only cons, it does take time and effort, which are very often in short supply. If you're a family man like I was, that's not easy. And also you have projects to deal with at the same time. So I want to thank you all with the note that I would personally go through this registration process all over again. And I do encourage all of the young colleagues to go through it as soon as they can. So thank you very much again. And I do apologize if I stepped over the time limit.
Just right on time. Thank you very much, Sasa. And I think what you said the last is already summarized the key points. Would you do it again? Yes, all over again through the 4 different registration. So with that, thank you very much, Sasa. Pak Habibie, semua speaker sudah selesai.
Silakan aja Pak dibuka sesi tanya jawab. Nanti saya di sesi di akhir aja.
Oke, ya. Jadi terima kasih semuanya, all the speakers. Prof. Chu sudah izin duluan karena beliau ada meeting. Tadi sudah untuk yang Prof. Chu kebetulan sudah sempat dibahas. Ini ada satu dari pertanyaan dari Pak Insinyur Mediono. Tadi ditulis pada saat Prof. Chu, tapi mungkin ini justru lebih tepat dijawab either oleh Pak Habibie atau Pak Bambang ya. Ini menanyakan apa perbedaan antara gelar sarjana teknik dari universitas dan dengan PE. Jadi silakan Pak Habibie atau Pak Bambang.
Oke. Terima kasih ya. Sebenarnya ini kalau pertanyaan ini ya boleh saya jawab singkat, tapi mungkin waktunya terbatas ya, karena untuk kita manfaatkan karena ada hadir speakers yang luar biasa nih, Pak Sasa, Bu Angeline dan Pak Xu ya. Tapi intinya bahwa gelar insinyur yang diperoleh dari perguruan tinggi itu gelar akademik ya. Gelar akademik, dan itu dirancang kalau zaman dulu itu memang sampai di atas 160 SKS ya, bahkan sekolah insinyur itu 7 tahun. Jadi betul-betul dia seorang yang disiapkan untuk bekerja. Nah, kemudian kalau yang sekarang ini hanya sarjana teknik ya, sarjana teknik yang hanya 144 kredit. Sehingga lulusan ini belum bisa dikatakan siap bekerja meskipun dia bisa bekerja ya. Ya, dia bisa klaim bekerja, tapi sebetulnya belum, karena ada beberapa exposure kepada dunia kerja yang belum lengkap gitu ya. Nah, beda dengan yang PE, PE itu sudah melalui pendidikan profesi mendapat gelar insinyur selama 1 tahun, kemudian ditambah lagi dengan experience, field experience itu very important ya, dan dia baru setelah experience selama 3 tahun, 4 tahun kalau di Kanada tadi saya lihat, itu baru bisa mendapat gelar PE. Ya, tidak serta-merta lulus dari perguruan tinggi bisa mendapat gelar PE. Tapi oke, saya akan take opportunity to raise a question to all the speakers ya. I think very important to know ya. You know that PE is responsible to conduct registration and then certification of the PE engineer, yeah, PE professional engineer, yeah. The adopting PE, as mentioned by Bu Angeline, is very, very important, but rewarding, very rewarding. But in practicality, this is very difficult, very hard to get support from stakeholders in Indonesia, yeah. Most people seeing it as an obstacle, additional burden, or restriction, or deprive their freedom or rights to work, yeah, because they have to go to some university again, and then they have to train here, train there, etc. Yeah. So, what is the key word, yeah, to convince them, yeah, in your country, yeah, your experience in your country, to convince them that this is very important, not only for yourself, but also for the public, to secure, to safeguard the public from the malpractice. Thank you. Gimana Pak Ken?
Yeah. Hi, Angeline. Did you get the question from Pak Bambang just now? Basically, it's a very practical question. How do you get people to get registered in Singapore?
It is still muted. That's still muted, Angeline.
Yeah, you're still muted, Angeline. Still muted. You are still muted. Hi, Angeline. You are still muted.
Hi, Angeline. Hi, Angeline.
You are still muted. You are still muted. Muted.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Me better now? Sorry. So yes, I got the question, and the question is about how do we convince the engineers to be registered, and that it is a rewarding and fruitful exercise, and that we have to do so. I understand that it's difficult. I mean, it is hard work, and and it's long hours. But so is engineering. I mean, you have already put yourself through engineering school. You're already in the profession, and you're already working hard for it. You have worked hard for it. So I see registration as just the next step. It's the pride of the profession, and also to be responsible for the designs that you are creating. I see it as a logical next step. So and not to mention that you will also represent your firm, promote engineering within the country, etc., which is a greater good that you will contribute. So to me, getting registered is just the next step in the profession of engineering.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Any comments from Pak Pop? Sasa?
Yeah, very, very good question. And I think the first when a country starts in introducing a new registration, I think there will be many very, very experienced, strong engineers who just would resist, because they proved over and over again that they are competent engineers. And I think it's important maybe that the first step would be to grandfather some with certain criteria, let's say those with over 30 years of proven experience, that to simply grandfather them into the process. Then I think the next step is to make sure that there is a personal responsibility and liability for the work done, and which would encourage then employees to demand from that it was like that in Canada. It would be a prerequisite of your employers that you were that you could, if you're not registered, that you could get registered. So I came from different country, different continent, and when the first employer hired me, they did ask whether I could get registered, because they want all of their engineers to be registered and be personally responsible for the work they do. And I think that's the last step, because then if you want to advance in your career, you have to be registered. And also I would make it relatively simple in the beginning, not to the point that you let incompetent people into the profession, but to make it as straightforward as possible for the people to get there. And then once you go through and develop a critical mass of engineers, and and younger people then realize that it is actually fulfilling and good for them to register, they would then go through the process. I mean, they would have to if they want to advance. So
okay, thank you. Terima kasih Pak Ken.
Oke, ya mungkin ini tadi saya sempat menyinggung Pak, seperti di DPA kan sebenarnya tadi ada tuh ditunjukin oleh Angeline tuh chart untuk jadi project director, perlu ini, project manager jadi ini. Sebenarnya terus saya ngelihatnya itu kayaknya mirip dengan yang Pak Bambang tadi tunjukin ya, untuk role sebagai IPP, IPM. Jadi mungkin itu bagaimana ada katalisnya itu bisa diselaraskan mungkin Pak ya dengan
betul.
Oke, ada pertanyaan berikutnya dari audience. Dari peserta, partisipan, apakah ada yang mau bertanya?
Richard mungkin ada.
If no questions from the audience, then I would like to raise some questions.
Oke, silakan Pak Habibie.
Okay. In Singapore, of course, in US, we recognize that professional engineers equipped with the PE stamp. They call it as a PE stamp. And how do we actually implement this PE stamp into our engineering practice? So when will we need to stamp the technical documents? What sort of documents we need to stamp? And the question number 2 will be, as professional engineer, how do we get paid? Do we get paid, of course, as per the contract, but sometimes in Singapore, what I understand that the PE will be will get paid based on the number of documents they stamp, or based on the complexity of the documents that they will stamp. I think those 2 questions for the time being, yeah, which need to be answered. Thank you.
Okay, so I think the question is for Miss Angeline Chan. If I may repeat the question, the first question is what kind of documents require PE stamp, and then how does the enumeration is calculated based on the number and the complexity of the documents to be stamped by the PE.
Yeah, so the documents that has to bear the PE stamps are the ones, specifically the ones that have to be submitted to the various authorities. So in Singapore, it will be to the building construction authorities, as well as say the roads authorities, etc., etc. So those that has to be certified by a structural engineer, or sorry, a professional engineer, those are the documents that will have to be stamped. I'm not aware that stamping or the signatures are based on quantity of drawings. I actually think that it's usually based on size of the projects, you know, how they are paid. In my involvement anyway, I'm not an engineer, I'm an architect. And in my involvement, I do know that it's based on the size of the project rather than the quantity of drawings that determines how much the professional engineer is paid. Yeah, actually, Frankie may know because Frankie works in Singapore as well. So whether it's, yeah.
Well, all I can add to that, yeah, I think you have answered that. But what I can add, I also just discovered this from Prof. Chu's presentation, that actually it is the PE board is the one that's granting the registration and the license, but
Yes.
the type of document that needs to be stamped and the qualification for the QP qualified person is actually determined by each of the different government bodies, the BCA, the LTA. They all have different QP requirements and the documents for them to stamp, I suppose. So I suppose it's a meeting between the two, and I'm really not the best person to say the detail of it.
Yeah, no, the qualifications is recognized or by the Professional Engineers Board. They are the ones that sets the exam, and they are the ones that sets the qualification and qualify the engineers.
Yeah.
The stamp, I understand that you mean when they certify the drawings that they do, the calculations that they do, and the design that they do. And the question is who requires them. So when you submit the drawings to the various government authorities, they require them to make sure that you are the qualified engineer. But the qualification of the engineer is determined by the Professional Engineers Board. They are the ones that sets the exam and recognize them. It's the same responsibilities that the Board of Architects hold as well in Singapore. The Board of Architects is the one that qualifies the architects. So it's the same duties and roles.
So before this is answered by Sasa Popovic, what I can say that the design, the calculation, the drawings can be done by non-PE. However, when they go to the authority, it needs to be chopped. It needs to be certified by the professional engineer. Something like that.
Correct. Ultimately, the professional engineer has to stand by the design and the calculations. So even if they did not physically prepare the calculations, they will have to stand by it because their signatures have to represent that it is correct, and it has to be in some way designed designed by them or upheld by them. Yeah, they're fully responsible for it.
So
yeah.
So Habibi, if I may add, so basically there are 3 stages in Singapore, right? First is like you get your PE registration, which in Indonesia is what we have as a SIP. And then after that, you got the practicing certificate. That is our STRI. But then to actually become to stamp on something, you actually basically become a qualified person for a certain project. One of the requirements for you to be a qualified person is that you are a PE with a practicing certificate. Now, this qualifying person, I think what I remember and what Prof. Chu presented, so you got this Land and Transport Authority, Building Construction Authority, Public Utility Boards, right? They have their own set of requirements, what constitutes a QP for them. So like a QP for Building Construction Authority might not be exact, it's about the same, but it might have different things than what the Land Transport Authority requires as a QP, but you have to be a PE. But say, for example, in Building Construction Authority, Angeline previously mentioned about specialist PE now. So if you're doing excavation more than 6 meters, then suddenly you have to have a specialist PE as a geotechnical engineer. So it's got that basically trying to understand it. It's got that 3. So, but effectively, when you become responsible for a project, that means you are a qualified person for the project who must be a PE with a practicing certificate.
Correct. Yeah, I think because when you submit to the various authorities, it depends on what your skill set is.
Yes.
Because engineering has so many different, and there's so many types of engineering, from structural, civil, geotechnical, then there's plumbing, electrical, and etc. There's so many. So you basically represent what your expertise is in the submission. That's why Frankie was saying that depending on who the authorities is, it's a different engineer who is submitting to that authority and signing for it. Yes.
So like what
it's a bit easier for architects, because we only have one skill.
What I know in Singapore now, like for Marina Bay Sands, I mean, even the resident engineer, the chief resident engineer must have about like 20 years of experience at that time.
Yeah.
So that is very unusual. To become a resident engineer, you basically only need about 2-3 years. But so that one, the Building Construction Authority requires 20 years minimum experience.
Yeah, it has to do with the complexity of the project. When the project becomes more complex, larger, then they actually look at the number of years of experience. Yeah.
Shall we allow Mr. Popovic to respond as well, Pak Devi?
Yes, sure, but
go ahead, Sasa.
Thank you. So the first question was what kind of documents? So I think I'm talking now based on my experience in Canada. So this is not covering other jurisdictions because they're all a little bit different. So and I would divide this in 2 points. So the first point is when you are submitting something for, let's say, building permit. So then you legally have to have stamped, sealed documents that are going there. So it's a legal requirement. However, there is also a professional associations requirement whereby they want you to use your PNG in your signature pretty much everywhere in all of your professional correspondence, but also in any documents that you create, any final versions of your documents, even if they may be reports or calculations or whatever that may be, they encourage you. So you may not be legally required to stamp those drawings, but they encourage you because that takes awareness, increased awareness for the profession. So for example, if you are submitting your report, let's say scheme design report to your architect or client, they want you to stamp that report, even though it's not, it may not be legally required. And the second question was related to how you're getting paid, whether it's per stamp. I think this would be very dangerous to pay by stamp, because it would inevitably lead to corruption. The way it works in Canada, it's you're not paid because you're a professional engineer, but you get the work because you're competent, and part of your competency is being a professional engineer. So if you have a good reputation, which is helped by your status, then obviously with your experience you can aim at bigger and better and larger projects that are well paid. And the last point is related to the stamping of the drawings. You don't have a single person who would actually stamp the, let's say, the entire structural package. What they encourage in Canada is that, let's say, if you're working on a large project and you design foundation only, substructure, you would only stamp those drawings. If you designed only a certain block of development, you would only stamp those drawings. Different engineers would stamp those drawings. And actually, who is stamping them? Those who are directly responsible for design. So it's not the project manager, it's not the director typically, it's those who are actually working on the design. And again, that really raises your awareness and your reputation, because if you're a young engineer responsible for it could be even a single drawing, you feel the pride and responsibility in sealing that drawing and stamping it.
I should also add that to Mr. Popovic's point about only stamping the parts that you've designed, that in Singapore, after the structural engineers completes their drawings and calculations, even though they stamp it, there is the requirement, as I said earlier, to have an accredited checker as well. The whole set of documents have to go to another qualified engineer for their checks and for their stamp as well, so that there's a 2-layer of checks in all the submission drawings and all the calculations, and not just one.
Yeah, it's similar in Canada, depending on the complexity of the project. But before you stamp, you have to have it checked. It's your personal responsibility to have it checked by a competent peer. On some special projects, the government may actually demand that it's checked by some completely independent third party. And this is very, if the things, not if they go wrong, but if there is any suspicion that there is some wrongdoing, then you can get into big trouble and lose your license over these things. So in other words, if you claim that someone has checked your work, but that hasn't been done, then the onus is that you are honest and you are providing an honest professional opinion. But so there are not many checks, but then if you get caught in lying or perverting the cause of practice, then you'll get into big trouble.
Anything else on this question, Pak Habibie, Pak Bambang?
Yes, I have a question. I don't know whether in your country also, do you have a kind of special technical competence certificate, like in Indonesia, like the issue also geotechnical, and then construction, and then bridges, and then many other things in Indonesia. But I don't know if in Singapore, in Canada also has that kind of certificates that we impose also to if, for instance, to join the tender, etc. Yeah. And then secondly, my question is related to, because PEE is covering not only civil engineering, yeah, but also other branches, other subsidiary discipline, yeah. So how about in practicality, yeah? How about the electrical engineer, mechanical engineer? Is there also a kind of PE that has to be imposed in the field work, yeah, in the practical work, yeah. That's my question. Thank you.
Okay, if I may frame it, the question is as such. The first one, obviously, so far we've only been discussing PE licensings related to built environment, building, just civil works. Pak Bambang's first question was, is in any of the country, in Singapore, UK, Belgium, what about the other disciplines, forestry, rail work, yeah, and stuff like that. And then the second question was are they required
theorities, yeah, for technical, geotechnical, and then how to apply that in the real world, yeah, geotechnical construction, building, and then bridges, roads, because there are many certificates in Indonesia.
Yeah, yeah. So PEE, the second question is PEE has got more than 10 disciplines under it.
23.
23. Okay, so we got forestry, industrial engineering, we got chemical engineering. I mean, like related to the first question, how do you manage that about certification, and should we make them all certified? And practically, are they required in business and commercial sense, like to do tenders and stuff like that? So maybe start with Miss Angeline Chan first, if you have.
Oh, I was going to suggest Sasa because he's the engineer. Do you want to give your examples first?
Yeah, yeah, sure. Thanks. Yeah. So, you know, my general view in engineering, keep it as simple as possible. You know, Einstein used to say that keep it as simple as possible, but not simpler than that. Allegedly, he said it, and I strongly believe in that. And so I think having so many licenses would just hamper the whole process and make it unworkable and unusable. So, for example, in Serbia, it's very similar. So you have one license number for designer, another one for construction side. Then if you're doing structures with longer spans, you have a third one. If you're doing tall structures, the fourth one, etc., etc. And I think it's just complicating everything, and then it inevitably leads to corruption. So in Canada, for example, and the States is very similar. You know, they have pretty much reciprocal agreements, and you can cross over from one state or province to another one, even between these two countries. So they're very similar, and they always put an onus on you as an engineer. Then that's why we have code of ethics. So if you're not competent to do long span structures or bridges, if you're designing only buildings, it's up to you to tell to your client, well, sorry, I can't help you, I'll have someone else. Or you can still do it, but you have to make sure that someone who is competent is with you reviewing. You know, so you go a level down, if you will, and almost like an engineering training, and then you do the work, but it must be reviewed by someone else. And I think I strongly believe actually in this approach. And a very important point, and this is really philosophical point, is that in those places, UK, Canada, you know, United States, if something goes wrong, if, you know, God forbid, building falls and people get hurt and injured, if there is a wrongdoing, if there is a gross negligence or corruption or whatever that may be, yes, you can legally be responsible for what you've done. So you can go to jail. But the main objective is always to find the cause and try to prevent similar things from happening in the future. So it's always emphasis on that. In country where I live now, in Serbia, the first thing they would do is they would put someone into jail, and and they would think, the government would think that they solved the problem. But in my opinion, that's not solving the problem. It's it's preventing you from progress, because the things with the progress, unfortunately, things do fail. We want to minimize them, but the things do happen. The idea is working within boundaries, and as responsible as possible. But if there is no negligence, then there shouldn't necessarily be a punishment. So I think these are important points. So whether you use licenses just to identify who is the person to punish, or whether you use it to encourage good, honest professional work. And I think these are the two differences.
Okay.
If I may frame it to Angeline, because I think it's also applied in the architectural world here in Indonesia. Like maybe it also mirror, because basically the question is there a merit to license every and single branch of engineering, the same way that architecture in Indonesia has got different licenses for architect, interior design, landscape architect, and stuff like that. I suppose that's the question, if I may frame it.
Sure. Let me answer from the engineering point of view. In Singapore, there's about 5,000, slightly less than 5,000 registered professional engineers. And to answer the questions, there are civil and structural engineers, electrical, mechanical, and chemical. So they make up a large portion, about 4,000 of that 5,000 numbers of registered engineers. The other registered engineers are geotechnical. We even have amusement rights, which are a specialized branch of engineering, lift and escalator, crane, access platform, pressure vessel, and protective security. And we are also having tunneling experts and all that as well. So I don't think it numbers 23. We don't have forest. I think someone mentioned forest engineers. We don't have that. It's not a single forest in Singapore. So we don't have 23, but we have, the usual numbers of engineers. The question about, I think Sasa spoke about disciplinary and going to jail and all that. The interesting thing is that the Professional Engineers Board also have a disciplinary role. So for engineers that do not abide by the law and or the act, and if there's any complaint from the public or from various authorities, the Professional Engineers Board also play a disciplinarian role in either disciplining or sanctioning the engineers, the errant engineers as well. So just to that point. About architects, I said earlier the architects are easier because it's just architecture. There's landscape architecture, that's a different discipline at all entirely, and interior design is not governed by the Act. So in Singapore, the Act governs the architects as a professional in a professional capacity. So, and I said it's easier because we are not divided into structure, engineering, mechanical. We don't have so many fields of engineering. It's just architecture. And regardless of whether you're building a house or a huge building, it is the same certification that you have to go through, which is, sitting for exams, getting logbooks approved. After you sit for exam, there's also interviews, there's case studies and all that. It is getting harder for both the architects and engineers to be certified these days. There are more and more obstacles that you have to go through. There's higher expectations of your knowledge and expertise. So that is why I was saying that, if you do it fast, quickly, it's probably easier. As we all get older, it's harder to sit for exams and get certified, isn't it? Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Ada tanggapan dari ini atau kita move on? Ini ada pertanyaan dari Pak Hilal, tapi sudah dijawab. Pak Hilal, kalau ada yang mau dipertanyakan lagi silakan. Tapi ini Pak Alif Usman dari tadi sudah ngangkat tangan. Silakan Pak Alif.
Okay, thank you, Frankie. Mr. Popovic, Ms. Angeline, thanks to share to us. Would you share to us how Singapore and USA or Canada increase a sense of urgency to be a PA and have PA stamp? Because we are now in Indonesia, we have a PA regulating, we have PAEE, but actually it's not enough yet to make all engineer registered PE by PAEE. And as long as I know, we don't use PS stamp to register engineering document until now. I hope you can tell us, yeah, how Singapore and Canada implementation PA and PS stamp for first time. A long ago, maybe. Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Frankie.
Terima kasih, Pak Alif. Angeline, would you like to answer, respond to that first before Sasa?
I don't quite understand the question. Can you paraphrase it for me?
He was asking, what is the moment? How did you get it? How did you get through that first step into the door, getting people registering as PE and starting get the ball rolling on the PE, enacting the PE law and the PE stamping and all that?
How are you saying that? How are the
how
are engineers being encouraged?
Yes.
To
how did Singapore get it the first time to get people starting to stamp and all that and abide by the law?
I think it's just a necessary act if you wish to practice in Singapore.
Okay.
Because if you do not have the license, you practically cannot submit to all the branches of authorities that you're required. You will always be behind the scene, I suppose, drawing and drafting, but you will not be able to, submit any of your drawings to the various authorities. And I think at the end of the day, if you want to do exciting projects and you want to also work outside Singapore, because Singapore is so small, being a certified engineer is a necessary thing to be. And we all know certified engineers are in demand everywhere anyway. A lot of the engineers in Singapore are working in the Southeast Asia region. And I think it's also having the satisfaction of knowing that, you're giving your clients the satisfaction of knowing that whatever you do, you also safeguards the public, and that, that in turn, being a certified engineer also ensures that you are in demand, you're remunerated handsomely, I suppose. I hope so, and that you will also be recognized working outside your country. So I think in Singapore, it was a necessary step to take for engineers to be certified. It is not easy to be certified, I must say, but it's a necessary step to take. And just to also give an added information that the PE board governs 5 main branches of the engineering that I was saying earlier, which is civil structure and M&E and all that. Yeah.
Sasa, would you like to add to?
Yes, certainly. I think there are a couple of steps that need to be taken for the registration to be effective. And now in answering your question directly right to how is that done in Canada, firstly I have to make to distinguish between, let's say, established country with not the country but established association that's been working for years and years, where we have gradual flow of new engineers coming into the practice, and then you're not actually jeopardizing your economy by suddenly introducing a very strict requirement to everyone. I think that's a very important distinguishment that has to be made. So in Canada, just to answer this, and then I'll go to the second point, what you may want to consider is, so in Canada, as I mentioned before, the liability is personal, it's not with the company. So let's say if I own a company and I have a person who is working under me as a professional engineer, the company is not responsible for that work. The company is legally, I'm talking about legal aspects here. Obviously, the company will get into trouble if it works and won't get more projects if it encourages bad practice. But legally, it is the engineer who stamped the drawings who is responsible for its consequences. So from that point of view, as an employer, so if I own a company, I want to employ people who are able to stamp the drawings, because I simply cannot oversee the work of everyone, you know, so they have to personally be capable and competent, and at the end sign and stamp, seal their work, and take responsibility for it. So, and I think that's the key point. And so if you're not, you can still work, you can get hired as an engineer in training if you fulfill other requirements that I mentioned before, but you won't be responsible for the work that you're doing, legally responsible, but your career progress will be really hampered. You know, you can only go so far if you do that. So again, the key was that the companies were hiring only those who can get registered, and then the company would pressure them to get registered as soon as possible. Now, if you don't have registration in your country, then you know you cannot suddenly impose this, because your economy would suffer, and then inevitably the government would loosen the rein, and you know, you would get really you know, even bad reputation for association. So what I would consider is maybe, as I mentioned before, grandfather certain experienced engineers, have a transition period whereby, let's say, within the 10 years you would you know, it would become stricter and stricter. And again, you do it in a way that you don't encourage people who are not competent to get into, but you just make it a little bit simpler initially, so that you don't stop the wheel of economy and design altogether.
Okay, thank you, Pak Habibie. Any response? We got 2 more questions. It was 3. Pak Ayu didn't lower his hand, I think.
Okay.
Pak Habibie, any response to that question before I move on to the next?
Oh, yeah, just continue to next questions.
Okay. The next question is by Pak RBP. For Angeline, how does your country arrange licensing for architect between architect that is doing the design and architect that is doing the supervision? Is there any licensing for different licensing, or the same licensing, or is there any licensing at all for architect that is doing supervision?
You know, in Singapore, there are many architects, foreign architects, who can work in Singapore that do designing. So they may design and produce a concept design. And because they are not registered in Singapore, they are not allowed to, they are not recognized as a qualified person, neither can they submit to the various authorities. So the licensed architect, the qualified person who submits to the various authorities, are then recognized as the architect of record. And they are the one that will be responsible for the design all the way to construction, all the way to when the building opens and beyond. So this architect of record is the one that is recognized to be fully responsible for the building from design to construction. So in our case, in architecture, there is no separation of a design architect or a supervision architect. They are the same one. They are the architect of record who is fully responsible. Yeah.
Okay. So they're one and responsible for both design and supervision. Pak Bambang, apakah ada lanjutan?
Yes, please. In here in Jakarta, we have the institution of architect, called EAI. They are only cover designer, architect who carry out design, and then the rest, such as supervision, such as making a quantity surveyor or quality surveyor, etc., is not covered by the institution previously. So therefore, the PII has we call engineering, architect engineering, which is cover for who does not carry design. This is just for information. Thank you for explanation from Angeline. And the others, I'd like to know also the practical in this matter in Canada? Please, Mr. Sasa.
I would appreciate if you could just repeat the specific question.
The question is about this whether there is a different responsibility and licensing certification between designing and supervising engineers or architect in Canada.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, actually, I was just typing a response to the very same question, so that's why I unfortunately haven't heard it. So there is no different grades. You're licensed as a professional engineer. The only different grade is that there is a specific license for, let's say, a structural engineer. So you have to be a professional engineer plus structural engineer to be able to do certain types of the works. But once you register as a professional engineer, then it's onus on you to work within your competencies. So if you're a competent, very competent designer, but let's say not competent constructor, you can still do construction, but so nothing is preventing you legally. But as a professional, you have to do it within your limits, which would initially be very low. And so you may want, if you want to pursue that career, you then may want to have someone who is competent in that area to supervise your work. So again, onus is not. That's what I said before. It's the key is to keep it very simple. And the way they do it is the pressure onus is on you as a professional to do only that which you're competent for.
Thank you for both responses. So now we know that in Indonesia we have an architect as a designer, and there is also architectural engineering. Thank you, Pak. Thank you, everybody.
Oke. Pak Habibie, atau ada lanjutan sebelum saya ke Pak Prastiwo? Pak Prastiwo sudah raising hand.
Ya, lanjut aja Pak, lanjut aja.
Pak Prastiwo, silakan pertanyaannya Pak.
Oh yeah, okay. Thank you, Pak Frankie. Yeah, okay. This is the interesting session, yeah, for all of us, yeah, especially for me, which is stay at the Batam Island, nearby to Singapore. Okay. Before going through to the summaries of this webinar, yeah, I would like to ask maybe Pak Popovic or Miss Angeline, yeah, regarding about the professional indemnity or the insurance of PE, yeah, because we know the PE, even though we have a remuneration rate, yeah, but we also have responsibility for what we design, like that. So is it compulsory, yeah, by individual or by company to have this insurance of professional works? And what is application in your country or your experience? Is it like that, Pak Frankie? Thank you.
Yeah. So the answer is yes, definitely. Both our architectural profession as well as our engineering profession are covered by professional indemnity insurance. So it is just, you can just buy the insurance from any of the insurance company, and we usually buy it the insurance, we usually cover it to the size of the projects that we undertake. So for huge projects, if your projects are multi-million dollars, the insurances are, will be in the millions as well. But the answer is yes. I mean, we do, as a company, protect all our engineers and architects with professional indemnity insurance. Yeah.
Meaning it's by company, yeah, Ms. Angeline, not is by individual PE like that.
So if you're working for a company, and I'm sure it's the same for Whitby Wood as well, as a company, they would cover their employees, and a lot of their companies would take care of the companies that way. If you are a sole proprietor, that means you're an engineer working for yourself, then I would still advise you to cover yourself with indemnity insurance.
Yes, if I could answer, yeah, it's I concur with Angeline's point. So yes, we have indemnity, professional indemnity insurance that's paid for by the company, and it's covering its employees as well. It was very similar in Canada with the Canadian companies I worked for. So there was all of the reputable companies, they would pay professional liability or professional indemnity insurance, and one would be covered through that. There is, however, catch in Canada in that there is no, and this was changed recently, but initially when I started practicing, there was no statute of limitation. So you were in theory responsible for your work indefinitely. So in, let's say 50, 60 years, something goes wrong with the project you were designing, your stamp is there, your name is there, and you can be sued against that, whether in the in the civil or criminal court. And if you're let's say retired at the time, or if you're not with the particular company you worked for at the time you did the projects, then you wouldn't necessarily be covered. So there is to protect against that Association of Professional Engineers, EGBC now in Canada, they would offer professional insurance against the individuals, and that would be part of your professional registration, annual registration. So that plus PI from the company would in theory cover you. I know that there were changes in Canada that they limited now there's no statute of limitation now limits responsibility for, I believe, 10 years after the completion of design. So I think it's a little bit better now, but still you have to be aware that once you leave, if you leave the company you work for, when you performed certain work for which you may be responsible for, your insurance may not cover you. So as Angelina said, you need to consider your personal insurance as well.
Does that answer, Pak Prastiwo?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Pak Popovic. Yeah. And
Habibie, any follow-up response? We got 7 more minutes in the Q&A.
I think yes, I agree to both Miss Angeline and Mr. Popovic that if we work as part of the company, then the company should provide a professional indemnity insurance for us as professional engineer. In that case, the company should not give all the PRI to engineers in the company. Only the engineers who are professional engineer responsible for each discipline. I can say that for one civil professional engineer should be given one PRI. We have one mechanical, we have one electrical. So then these guys will be fully responsible for all the designs produced by the company, something like that. Yeah, thank you.
And yes,
yeah, I have to respond to this, because I think this is exactly opposite from the way it works in Canada. In Canada, as I mentioned before, you are personally, so if you design the building, you are responsible for this and you have to stamp it. So it's not a single person, because you just cannot, if you have a practice that has 100 engineers and let's say 100 structural engineers and only one engineer who is stamping all the drawings, or even 5 engineers, there is no way they could in detail fully understand that design, and then you're diluting responsibility. I was in so many, for example, as I mentioned, in the UK, you do not have mandatory licensing. So you do have you have chartered engineers, but the responsibility lies with the company. So there are many cases where you have good project, you have a award, and then you have a director going there taking the prize for it. And then other projects where you had something goes wrong or is perceived to go wrong, and then everybody says, oh, actually I didn't do it, it was that person. And then you start pointing fingers to different directions, and you cannot establish, unless you go through legal procedure, you cannot establish who is responsible for that. So I strongly believe that's not a good practice to have a single engineer who's responsible. You're just dealing with the consequences. So you have someone to put into jail, but you're not really solving the problem. So I believe you have to empower people, to give them, through the registration, to give them professional status, and then hold them responsible for what they do.
I support very much what Sasa is saying as well. It is you cannot have one person representing your entire firm. You know, no one would want to be that one person anyway. Your indemnity insurance has to cover the office, the firm, and to allow your engineers to freely work within the realm of their professionalism, so that they can deliver the job and not be burdened by the liability that they're taking on.
I think, if I may add, we got 4 more minutes. I think what Pak Habibie was trying to get is exactly establishing that link. In Singapore and Canada, you already have the PE
Yep.
system running, and so the PII, the professional indemnity insurance, is basically relying back on those PE systems. So I think what Pak Habibie, you may correct me if I'm wrong, Pak Habibie, but I think what you're trying to say is like, when there's a firm and there is people with the PE, civil, mechanical, and all that, then the PII can go into that company. Am I getting it right, Pak Habibie?
Yes, I think that is correct. If I may want to comment, if we have the case that we have a consultancy services company who doesn't have enough PE, would that be okay to get kind of a freelance professional engineers out of the company to support the, of course, the design review process?
Sasa?
Yeah, I don't see why not. That's common practice. So, for example, in Canada, you do your company does certain design. You know, you may be competent in 90% of it, but you may have you may lack competency in certain areas. Let's say your design has a very long, unusual span that you want it reviewed by independent company. So then you would hire, or even by independent professional, it doesn't have to be a company. So then you would hire that person. You would check their credentials. You would, very importantly, have a contract with them. Because without a contract, you won't be able to get a profession. Now, in those countries, you don't have to have a written contract. Even the oral agreement could be a contract, but it's obviously harder to prove in the court of law. You know, as long as they're competent and professional, and then they would actually sign and seal the documents that would confirm what they've done and you know, what their findings are relative to that review. That is okay, and then they are from the liability point of view. If you hire them to do only review, they would be liable for the review. But if you hire those people outside of your organization to do certain design, they would also be liable for the design. Now, the rest of it, how you protect yourself from the insurance point of view, it's more the question for the insurers, because if you have someone who is very, very competent and protected, but doesn't have, you know, doesn't have the economic sort of strength behind that person, then if you have, let's say, a civil lawsuit, then usually what people do is that they go against richest ones within the design process, because that's where they can get the money for. So I think this part of the question is more for the insurers than for someone like me.
Maaf Pak Habibie, ini tinggal sebenarnya sudah habis waktunya.
Okay.
Apakah kita tutup? Tadi Pak Ayudin ngangkat tangan, tapi udah diturunkan. Terus sekarang Pak Bambang Priyatmo juga mengangkat tangan. Pak Ayudin, apakah ada pertanyaan?
If we can grant another 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Oke, so kita perpanjang 15 menit.
Okay, thank you.
Apology to Angeline and Sasa. Thank you for staying with us. We'll go through the next 2 questions. Ya, Pak Ayudin, silakan.
Yeah, thank you very much, sir. Actually, I would like to ask about the difference between engineer and professional engineer, because according to me, to different position in Indonesia, there are titles that are obtained through education, and professional engineers are expertise in working in the field. The characteristic of the engineering professional meet the needs of a very important and useful demands, caution, and consideration doesn't depend on standardization. Involve the types, the activities, the require high level of intellect.
Pak Ayudin mute. Pak Ayudin di mute itu nggak kedengeran.
Oh ya, yeah. My question, sir, how to the difference between engineer and professional engineers? Because according to me, to the difference position in Indonesia, there are titles that are obtained through education, and professional engineers are expertise in working in the field. Many have the title of engineer, but isn't a professional engineer. So that if the building is the match of collapse, then the responsibility is ignored and even in trouble with the law. What is the definition of professional engineer so that he can be appreciated, not an engineer? Thank you.
Okay, maybe this one is for Sasa and Pak Bambang Guritno. Basically, the question is what differentiate between someone that gets an engineering degree and by extension the title ingenieur and a registered professional engineer. So maybe Sasa first, since you're unmuted. Then,
okay. I'll give you two examples. One is Canada, again, very similar in the United States, but I'm more familiar with Canada. And the second one is the UK. So in Canada, the title engineer is regulated by the law. You simply cannot call yourself an engineer unless you're registered as a professional engineer. So even when you get a degree engineering degree from university, you are not entitled to call yourself an engineer. When you start working as an engineer in training, after the steps that I mentioned before, you can call yourself an engineer in training, but not an engineer. Only when you register yourself, you can call yourself an engineer, and this is actually protected by the law. And if you call yourself an engineer and you're not, there are penalties for that. Now, in the UK, it's quite different. In the UK, for example, if you say that you're an engineer, they think that you are, fixing the boilers, that you are pretty much a manual worker who is servicing, locomotive engines or boilers, or doing some manual labor related to engineering. And so in the UK, they're very, very liberal countries. They are not, the law is not protecting. You can call yourself however you want. It's really up to then, your clients it's only on them to check whether you're competent for something or not. So that's, I hope this answers your question. So if you work as an engineer in Canada, there's only professional engineer. There's only one engineer. There are no two entities.
Let me just jump in here to say that it's the same in Singapore as of Canada. You can't call yourself an engineer unless you are licensed and regulated by the law. It's the same with architects as well. We can only call ourselves architect if we are registered. So the ones that graduate, like what Sasa says in Canada, can't call themselves an architect or an engineer. So in our office, for the graduate architects, they are actually called architectural assistants. They can't call themselves an architect until they are, they've passed their exams and are registered. So it brings me back to my very, very, very early point that because of this, because you can't call yourself an engineer and an architect, it is part of your continuing journey of becoming an architect or becoming an engineer to ensure that you do get licensed. It's not just part of graduating from university, but it's also getting the licenseship that makes you the engineer or the architect. It's part of, like I said, either the continuing journey or the pride of eventually reaching your goal as to why you have to be registered.
Thank you, Angeline and Sasa. Pak Bambang Guritno, ada tanggapan, Pak? Di mute, Pak. Pak Bambang mute.
Ya, terima kasih. Terima kasih Pak Sasa dan Bu Angeline. Saya kira saya akan sampaikan dalam bahasa Indonesia dan mudah-mudahan ini topik sore ini, siang ini sangat-sangat bagus, sangat menarik. Mudah-mudahan Pak Habibie dan kawan-kawan merekam ya, dan nanti bisa disebarluaskan ke berbagai pihak, berbagai kalangan di Indonesia ya. Jadi ini memang agak sedikit salah kaprah ya yang terjadi di Indonesia. Seringkali orang lulus dari perguruan tinggi menyebut dirinya insinyur gitu ya. Padahal dia sebetulnya belum insinyur ya. Kalau di luar negeri belum bisa dikatakan sebagai insinyur. Memang ada beberapa university yang dulu ya memberikan gelar insinyur. Cobalah masing-masing ditengok di ijazahnya. Tidak ada satupun saat ini yang memberikan gelar insinyur. Hanya beberapa university yang pendidikannya itu panjang ya. Bahkan saya sendiri yang lulus tahun 79 itu masih sarjana teknik. Ya toh, sarjana teknik bukan engineer, bukan insinyur ya. Nah, ini yang seringkali keliru diartikan. Seorang insinyur itu yang disebut ini, insinyur itu menganggap diri insinyur, lulus dari perguruan tinggi menganggap diri insinyur. Padahal dia sebelum jadi insinyur. Definisi menurut undang-undang, insinyur itu adalah gelar yang diberikan oleh perguruan tinggi apabila dia telah melampaui program studi, program profesi insinyur. Kalau dia sudah melampaui program studi, program profesi insinyur. Jadi ini merupakan tahapan setelah yang bersangkutan lulus sebagai sarjana teknik. Ya, dia lulus sebagai sarjana teknik baru menempuh pendidikan program studi, program profesi insinyur. Ketika lulus dia diberi gelar profesi insinyur. Tapi dia belum insinyur profesional. Dia harus bekerja dulu selama paling tidak 3 tahun lah itu. Berpraktek dulu di lapangan, baru dia apply kepada asosiasi profesi yaitu PII yang diberi mandat untuk mendapatkan gelar mendapatkan insinyur profesional. Inilah yang sebetulnya PI itu adalah insinyur profesional yang tadi disebutkan. Kalau skornya 600 itu IPP, kalau 3000 itu IPM, kalau 6000 itu IPU. Jadi kira-kira gitu Pak Ayudin. Jadi mudah-mudahan ini memperjelas, dan apabila yang bersangkutan sudah mendapatkan IPE, IPP, IPM, IPU, baru dia mendapatkan izin berpraktek, itu loh ya, izin berpraktek sebagai insinyur profesional. STR itu license to practice ya. Oke, terima kasih.
Terima kasih Pak Bambang. Pak Habibie ada tanggapan? Kita mungkin kalau ada tadi Pak Bambang Priatmo ngangkat tangan lagi, apakah masih ada pertanyaan Pak atau?
Oh no, it was not question actually.
Okay.
And actually that was out of the topic was gone. It's about identity insurance. It's okay lah.
Oke. Ya. Terima kasih. 4.30.
Ya, saya kira cukup ya.
Ya.
Ini Pak ini. Terima kasih.
Jadi saya kembalikan ini ke Pak Habibie.
Okay, just want to add that when I graduated from the university, I joined a Canadian company, Popo, called Inco, and this Inco guy, actually Inco originally a Canadian company. Where the headquarters is based in Manitoba province, somewhere in Thompson. So on that time, my senior general manager named Marty Holmberg, he's a PE of APEC-M, Association of Professional Engineer and Geoscientists of Manitoba. So this is the way we learn the PE practice, how the PE practice rely on the code of conduct or code ethics of as engineer, something like that. So that is the main reason that actually Pak Frankie, when he proposed this kind of event, I certainly talked to Pak Bambang Guritno that this is going to be a good event for us to educate us more on the knowledge on how the PE internationally implemented. So I think this is a good lessons learned from this session. And to Miss Angeline Chen, actually I work for a Singaporean company called Surbana Jurong. I am more SMAC International. This is Australian company previously and acquired by Surbana back in 2016. So this is what we know that the PE in Singapore is also very good practice, and we all Indonesian engineers should learn also from Singapore. I think that's the closing remarks from me. If Pak Bambang has another closing remarks, please welcome.
Pak Coki salah satu grandfather kita kalau disebut oleh Pak Sasa. Apakah ada tanggapan Pak Coki? Pak Coki raising hand. Pak Coki di mute itu, di mute.
Thank you very much, Mr. Frankie. I just want to accentuate the statement of Mr. Bambang Guritno that in Indonesia it is really different, yeah, with other countries, yeah. For example, the graduation for engineer, yeah, it's only 144 credits, but the engineer itself, after 3 years, get experience. And then if only submit the what we call 5, yeah, for formular application professional. But if he doesn't submit the 5, it doesn't mean that he will be engineer. No, he only can pass after submit the 5. And if in this younger age, yeah, he moved to Singapore, want to do work, yeah, as professional, yeah. Say he is already professional engineer, but IPP. But I don't think that he will be able to do as professional engineer. It's far from that. He should cooperate. He should have peer that related to his activities. He has to show his good intention and his hard willingness to prove that he is good engineer. And you know, like Miss Angeline, yeah, Miss Angeline, yeah, you call in your name is architect, yeah, but you are engineer actually. That's different, yeah. I mean, she's a good engineer that already promote and ask so many projects to government, and it's okay. It's approved, yeah, and then he implemented it. So he would rather use architect than PE, right, Miss Angeline? Just like you. But actually, the real PE, yeah, we back to Indonesia, yeah. So we have so many engineer amateur, yeah, Mr. Frankie. That's why me and Mr. Bambang, the others, yeah, has to sort which one, yeah, in MUK, yeah, in Majelis Uji Kompetensi, which one is really engineer, which one that 3 years after, within 3 years after graduate from school, has no experience at all in engineering, in civil engineering. We have to select very much, very, very careful. So this is the problem of Indonesia, Mr. Popovic, yeah. That's why our conversation traffic is a little bit run here and there, yeah. Because we are very difficult to go to other country or other countries to be a professional engineer. But somebody if want to be good PE, he will be able to. I think this only additional from me. Thank you very much.
Ya, makasih.
Thank you very
Pak
much.
Coki.
Thank you.
Makasih Pak Coki. Jadi kita sudah 7 menit lewat dari waktunya. Pak Habibie, saya kembalikan ke Pak Habibie dan Pak Bambang. Apabila ada pertanyaan lagi, silakan nanti di email atau di WhatsApp
Ya.
dan kita sampaikan.
Baik, saya kira untuk ini Pak Habibie langsung kita tutup ya. Jadi on behalf of the PII, I would like to express my gratitude to thanks to Miss Angeline, Pak Popovic, also Pak Ken, and then also Prof. Chia, yeah, that has been delivering so fruitful discussion and then sharing the knowledge and then experience from other countries to Indonesia. I think to me it's still a big challenge to be implemented in Indonesia, yeah. But however, this is very important, and I think to PIF we have to work very hard about how to convince people, how to convince our engineers to join the PE or PC in the future, yeah. I hope that this will be very beneficial to the country as well as to the individual itself, yeah, himself, yeah. Because as Ibu Angeline Chan mentioned, yeah, it's very rewarding, and also this opened the opportunity also to work in the overseas, yeah, if possible, yeah. I think I would like to thanks to appreciate to everybody who joined this discussion, and in particular to the speakers and moderator. Yeah, it's very good conduction in conducting this webinar. Thank you very much. Selamat sore. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Can we have a photo session?
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Can we have photo session, Pak?
Yes.
Photo session, sorry. Hi, Angeline Salsa, would you mind staying for a while for a photo session?
I'm not sure how you do it, but we'll certainly stay.
Yeah. Just keep the camera on.
Thank you all for having us.
Yeah, where are you? Where are you now, Pak Popovic? Where are you staying?
I'm now based in Belgrade. That's capital of Serbia.
Right now in Belgrade.
Right now, I'm in Belgrade.
Oh,
yes.
so it's already midnight, yeah.
No. It's actually midday. So I'm okay. I'm okay. It's late for you, not for me.
Midday. Thank you very much, ya.
Oke, Pak Imam, bisa difoto, Pak?
Sudah, Pak, sudah.
Oke,
nah, ini tinggal slide terakhir nih. Oke.
It's pretty awesome.
Oke, Pak. Siap.
Oke. Terima kasih. Terima kasih, Pak Bambang.
Thank you.
Thank you, Miss Angeline.
Thank you.
Pak Didi semua.
Ya.
Thank you, everybody.
Sukses.
Ya, makasih. Bro,
terima kasih.
Mantap.
Thank you semuanya. Ya, mantap.
Terima kasih Pak Muhammad.
Mantap semuanya. Terima kasih. Ya.
Oke. Oke, thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Si Pak Bamban.
Terima kasih
Terima
Pak
kasih.
Francisco.
Terima kasih Pak BG.
Ya, terima kasih. Waduh. Pak Zainal, terima kasih semuanya.